Everybody, welcome to Biosummit 5.0. My name is David Sun Kong. I am the director of the Community Biotechnology Initiative at the Media Lab at MIT, and I'm also one of the founders of the Biosummit. It's such a huge honor to be here with you all. I'm going to share my screen now, and we will get started with today. So hopefully you guys can all see my screen, yes? So I want to start out first by acknowledging Pat Paternotaporn for making yet another incredible Biosummit logo. So it's been really incredible having his design skills be a big part of this event over the past 5 years. So welcome everybody to the Biosummit. As we get started, just some really quick tech expectations. So if you guys don't mind, make sure that your audio is muted and that we would love to see your faces. So please do share your video if you're able to. Again, one of the reasons we're actually in meeting mode is so that we all can look at each other and kind of engage with each other despite the virtual setting. But a reminder to all that every session in Biosummit is being recorded, and we are going to publish the videos from all of the main sessions, the plenary sessions, and all of the program tracks onto YouTube after the event. So if you do not want to be recorded, then you can, of course, turn your video off and turn your audio off as well. And as you all can see right now, we have a super engaged chat. Shout outs to Carolyn and Sarah, our amazing chat moderators, and to all of our organizers who are also in the chat right now. And a quick note, you may have noticed the orange backgrounds. If you do see folks with orange backgrounds, those are folks that are part of our organizing team. So just so you guys are aware. So that is some tech expectations. And then if everybody can just give this a shot right now, for those of you that may be a little bit newer to Zoom, there's a bunch of really neat ways for you all to engage over the course of the Biosummit. So you can use these little reactions. So if you guys want to try giving a little reaction right now, you can give a little heart or a thumbs up or anything, and it'll pop up inside your screen. So you guys can practice doing that. I'm seeing some hearts and some thumbs. That's great. And actually, Clayton from MIT, I'm wondering if we can actually launch the Zoom poll right now, because this is our 5th Biosummit, which to me kind of blows my mind. It feels like we really just started doing this. But we'd love to see how many of you have been to the previous Biosummits before. So if we can get the poll launched, then you can basically pick which years that you may have been in the Biosummit previously. Have you come to Biosummit 1.0? 2.0, 3.0, or 4.0, or if this is your first Biosummit, actually. So let me just see here. Is the poll working?
Yep, it's launched.
Beautiful. Thank you, Clayton. So you guys can, it's true, there just should be a none of the above option if this is new, but that's okay. Well, if it's none of the above, you can also put it in the chat that you're new. This is your first Biosummit. But welcome to everybody here, regardless if this is your first Biosummit or if you've been to all of the Biosummits. I think there's just a small handful of us here that have been to all 5 Biosummits, but welcome to everybody. And before we kind of dive in much more deeply, I really want to start by just giving a massive, massive thanks and huge love to our entire global organizing team. So Biosummit is a massive effort that requires a huge amount of work and labor and love. And all of the folks that you see on this screen and the next 2 screens have all put in so much time and effort. So everybody, if you don't mind, we can just do a little round of applause. You don't have to unmute, but just give a big round of applause to our entire organizing team. All of the folks shown here, really just mind-blowing, incredible work. We'll thank them all in greater detail throughout the conference, but just know that every aspect of the Biosummit, from the social media to organizing all of the tracks to the engagement on Slack, everything is all done by this incredible group of organizers. And we really, really, one, Biosummit would not be possible without you, but 2, I really am so honored to be a part of this group and to call you all friends, collaborators, and comrades in all of our great work together. So thank you to our incredible organizing team. And to get into the Biosummit today, as a reminder, more than 700 of you applied to be a part of the Biosummit. Okay, so it's a giant global effort. I'll share some more details and stats later, but please be patient, please be flexible. Things go wrong all the time. This is life. So we hope that you all just know that we are all working and doing our very, very best to make this as smooth an experience as possible, but hiccups will happen. So just be aware that that is going to be a part of this experience. And, to really talk about what Biosummit's all about. At its core, I think, for us at the Biosummit, we've been thinking a lot about this idea of who gets to participate in science, right? Ultimately, who are the folks that have agency and get to shape what happens, in particular in the life sciences and in biology, synthetic biology, biotechnology, and beyond. And so a number of years ago, now in the late 2000s, there was a really interesting kind of movement started to unfold, initially called do-it-yourself biology or DIY bio. Mackenzie Cowell and Jason Bobe, they were one of the first ones, at least in the United States, to start doing some organizing in this. Folks started setting up all kinds of really interesting laboratories in unusual spaces. This is a funny little drawing from Rob Carlson showing his garage lab. This goes back all the way to even 2010. And folks started setting up these labs. This was again in the late 2000s that were not in academic spaces, not in corporate or industry spaces, but truly grassroots, citizen and community-led laboratories. GenSpace, I know there's some folks from GenSpace here. I was one of the very first community labs. BioCurious on the West Coast in the United States. I know there's some Hacteria folks here as well, organizing in Europe and in Asia. So really in a very similar time in the late 2000s, early 2010s, we really started to see this global proliferation of laboratories and folks really trying to bring biotech and the life sciences to as many people as possible, really trying to bring that, that access and that participation and that democratization of this work. And I know for myself, my first introduction to do-it-yourself biology was actually through this very, very weird FBI workshop that was held in 2012. I know a number of you in this room were actually there. I'm curious if you were at this workshop, you can mention it in the chat. One of the weirdest meetings that I've ever been to, but in some ways was a precursor to the Biosummit. This was an event where the FBI, having resources, pulled together a big global community of folks that had labs that were being organized at the time. And for me, going to this was a really transformational moment. Watching all the folks present at this conference, I was like, wow, I want to build one of these labs. And so, for me personally, I'm over here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the Boston area, and we had a community space in Cambridge that I helped to found called EMW, an art, technology, and community space where all kinds of arts and other types of creative expression. And around 2014 and 15, we started to organize our own very first community biology lab. So we called it EMW Street Bio, and we started to have all kinds of wonderful events and workshops and ways to engage our community. You may recognize actually some faces from this now, I think, historic kind of slide. Mary Magic, Annie Liu, Verge, so many wonderful folks were part of our community lab back more than 5 or 6 years ago now. And so all of this kind of energy and this movement globally, for me, I ultimately in 2017 ended up joining the Media Lab to help found the Community Biotechnology Initiative, which is the research group that I currently lead. And the Media Lab at MIT, it ended up being a useful place in some ways to help support and provide resources for this larger movement around do-it-yourself biology. And so in 2017, when I helped to found this research group at the Media Lab, and our work is really exploring that intersection between the life sciences and social justice and movement building, collective intelligence, and so on, one of the first things that we did was to help organize the first global community biosummit. And first, just really here, I just want to shout out some of the wonderful group members that are part of CBI at MIT. So huge love to all of our members and all of our researchers. And so in 2017, we got to work with so many of the amazing organizers that are right here in this Zoom room to organize the very first Global Community Biosummit. And for those of you that were at the very first Biosummit, you will remember this was really kind of like the family reunion of the family that you didn't know that you had. It was truly one of the most transformational moments in my life to be in this room with so many incredible folks in DIY bio, biohacking, biomaking, all getting together. And again, at the time, we really hadn't been able to, pull together a truly international gathering with resources to fly everybody all together to be in the same room. And so, it was a really special event and a special moment. And to me, one of the really great things we do at every Biosummit, and we do this at Virtual Biosummit as well, we have this thing called Hello World, where we actually have everybody have 1 minute and 1 slide to get on stage and share about their labs and their projects. And to me, it's so special to just see the incredible global diversity, all of the energy and the folks all around the world for people that are just so excited about sharing about their grassroots work. And so, And shout out to Scott in the chat here, who's took some of these amazing photos. And so again, really great global representation at this very first Biosummit. And I want to shout out in particular Marshall Gans, who's going to be joining us a little bit later on in the plenary session. Marshall is a movement builder, worked very closely with Martin Luther King in the United States, Cesar Chavez, and others. He helped to build Obama's campaign in 2008 and 2012. And from the very start of Biosummit, I think part of what's made this event a bit unique is that we've really brought in social justice and movement building as a core aspect of what this event is all about. And so Marshall has been a really tremendous part of helping to frame the Biosummit as a movement event. It's not just about sharing our cool science, but all of you here in this room, we are all community builders, right? We are all organizers. And so I think bringing in those shared identities has been a really critical part about the Biosummit as well. So each year of the Biosummit since then, we've continued to grow. In 2018, and again, you can see the evolution of the beautiful logos. We added more and more participants to our wonderful movement and to our events. I love this quote from Paige Whitehead: "I'm leaving this conference feeling like everything is possible." And just to say again for everybody here, the world is a very challenging place right now. And I really hope that all of us today and over the next coming days and then past the event into our coming weeks and months can continue to lean on each other and support each other, because that's ultimately what this community is all about. And so in 2018, we continue to grow, more than 350 accepted participants, more than 400 applicants from folks all around the world, 32 countries represented in our second Biosummit. And in Biosummit 2, I think we really start to become much more intentional about this idea of structure, right? How do we ultimately organize ourselves as a global community and as a movement? One kind of a set of ideas that was, I think, really valuable and interesting was starting to think about collective intelligence and superminds, the idea that all of us together as one big network might mean something more than any individual lab or any individual person. And so this was the year that we first started to use the word and the phrase community bio a little bit more intentionally. So you'll notice the name Biosummit. The full name of the conference is the Global Community Biosummit. And I want to shout out Mary Magic from Hacteria here. Mary was a student at the Media Lab when we were first birthing the Biosummit. And we had this meeting, we were trying to figure out what the name of this event was. And global felt important, community felt important, bio felt important, and then summit felt important. But embedded in that was this phrase community bio. And so I do think that there is a really interesting evolution between do-it-yourself biology and community biology. The idea that we are about a network, we are about a movement, and that we are about our collective group working together. And so what ultimately does bring a big global community together? And I'm sure, as you are all aware, this movement and so many of the larger kind of aspects of the open science DIY bio, community bio movement, it's like pirate ships, right? Every lab is out there doing different things, and there is no, kind of CEO or director of the movement, right? Like nobody can say, hey, GenSpace, you guys do this, or BioCurious or Hacteria, do you do that? Everybody's doing their own thing, right? And so when you have like a really interesting community like that, what are the things that can bring a big community together? And so there are a lot of things that we kind of identified over the years: a shared set of values, a shared set of vision and purpose, a shared set of ethics and norms, right? A shared set of needs. All of these kind of aspects can help bring together a very, very diverse global community. And so in Biosummit 2.0, we started to do some of the work trying to articulate what our shared values were. So this was some work done with Gunther Weil, where we did a large-scale values exercise and identified some values like, pioneerism, progress, collaborative individualism, wisdom, etc. And this was done in a large-scale co-designed activity. We also started identifying some of our needs. I love this is JJ and friends here starting to kind of figure out, what can we do to support each other, and what are our various needs that we have as a community. And then again, going back to our work with Marshall, this is when we really started to think about, what is our shared purpose, right? What is the reason that we're trying to, kind of ultimately work together here? And so we went through a process at Biosummit 2.0 where we started with a smaller group of organizers, around 25 folks, and did a first version of a statement of shared purpose. At the Biosummit, did an increasingly larger set of workshops with 50 to 75 people per group, and then ultimately had hundreds of people contribute to this, what we called our statement of shared purpose. And again, this is a framework that connects very much with Marshall and his work. And again, Marshall will be speaking a little bit later on this morning. I'm going to read to you our statement of shared purpose, okay? This was, again, established at Biosummit 2.0. Our shared purpose is to fundamentally transform the life sciences and democratize biotechnology, to inspire creativity and improve lives by organizing life science changemakers and bioenthusiasts to build an inclusive global network, cultivate an accessible commons of knowledge and resources, launch community labs and projects, and enable local educators. Okay, I hope you all love that statement as much as I do. I've got a poster of it in our lab, and we all have it, something we can look at every single day. And this was something that was co-designed by the entire community, right? Hundreds of folks contributed every single aspect of this statement. And so, again, I think another really important aspect about the statement is making explicit things that may be implicit within a group. And so for all of you, no matter what organization or what types of groups you're in, having a statement of shared purpose, I think, is a very valuable and important exercise to have. And so moving into Biosummit 3.0, now in 2019, we still held this event at MIT. We could barely fit everybody into the same room at this stage of the Biosummit's evolution. So you can see all of the wonderful folks all crammed in together. Very COVID unsafe, I might add. So this is not something we would do today, but back in 2019, this was a really special moment for all of us just to be in the same room. Again, more than 500 accepted participants from every corner of the world, a part of Biosummit 3.0. And again, we'll talk about this a lot throughout today in the conference, but Biosummit is a highly participatory event, okay? This event is all about you. We are here ultimately as the organizers to create a substrate for all of you to share your incredible work. And Biosummit 3.0, we had more than 170 participant-led talks, breakout sessions, workshops, and so on. So again, all about you guys and your work and what you want to share. And again, I hope you all embrace that participation as full-heartedly and open-mindedly as you can. And so also at Biosummit 3.0, we started thinking a lot about ethics and norms. And DJ Arnav, in addition to being one of our organizers and being a part of all 5 Biosummits, had a very famous quote that year, which is, "Science is hard, but people are harder," which I still love dearly to this day. We are, at the end of the day, a bunch of life science nerds. And thinking about ethics was a really big part of Biosummit 3.0. And what we did was, and I really want to shout out and acknowledge Alex Perlman, who, in addition to building the incredible website that you've all hopefully had a chance to visit now, led this co-design community ethics workshop that we did at the Biosummit, where we again had hundreds of participants, our entire group here, work together to identify what are some key ethical principles for our movement, what are ways in which we should be engaging with each other, and norms that we should have, and also ways that we should be conducting our research. And so Alex had a really wonderful set of practices in which we engage with storytelling and relational building to ultimately generate this set of principles, which are shown here. And I encourage you all to visit the biosummit.org/ethics page. We can get that link into the chat as well, to really look at this ethics document, which again was contributed to by hundreds of people from the Biosummit. You'll notice too, in all of these documents, they're versioned, right? Ethics document 1.0. Why is it versioned? Well, it turns out that things change and evolve, right? We all as individuals and organizations change and evolve, the movement changes and evolves, and the world changes and evolves. So having these documents be living is a really critical part, we believe as well, in this co-design. And the other huge thing we did at Biosummit 3.0 is we launched our very first Global Community Biofellowship. And I know many of our Community Biofellows are right here in the room. This again connects to a really wonderful definition of leadership. Leadership is accepting responsibility to create conditions to enable others to achieve shared purpose in the face of uncertainty, okay? I love this definition of leadership. There are 3 core aspects. Number 1, it's accepting responsibility. Leadership isn't something that just happens on its own. It's something that we all have to embrace. Number 2, leadership is not about, look at me, the fancy leader. It's ultimately about empowerment and engaging and enabling others to fulfill their potentials, whatever that may be. And the third part of this definition is in the face of uncertainty, right? When do we need leadership? We need leadership when times are hard, right? When times are uncertain. And of course, right now in the world, we're facing a lot of uncertain times, which is why we believe leadership is such a big part of our movement. And so when we think about scaling this movement, in launching this program, this was really what this was all about. This first fellowship program class, we had 36 fellows from all around the world. And again, I think a number of the fellows are here in the Zoom room right now. And again, just every corner of the world was a part of this group. And each year with our fellowship program, we try to do the same all throughout Africa, Latin America, Europe, North America, and so on. And it's really, really amazing to see over the past 3 years, this group blossom and to see their leadership journeys. But ultimately, this is about scale, right? Every single one of these is individuals is out there in their communities doing this work, and being able to have a leadership training and practice, and ultimately being connected to this larger network of support, I think is a really big part of what this program is all about. And again, Maria Chavez, huge shout outs to Maria and all of the incredible organizers of the Fellows Program. We'll talk about this a little bit later on in the plenary this morning as well. All right, and now on to last year's Biosummit, Biosummit 4.0. Because of the global pandemic, we had for the very first time a virtual Biosummit. And this was a huge, big deal for us as organizers, right? We didn't know what was going to happen trying to shift this really powerful in-person event where we can hug each other and dance and laugh and cry and work, and all of a sudden shifting it into a virtual environment, what that was going to be like. And so I think, we were really fortunate that last year's event ended up being such a huge success and such a big moment for all of us, I think, going through a very challenging pandemic. We had more than 650 folks from all around the world participate in last year's Biosummit. It was such an incredible group. And again, many of you are here in this room right now. Again, 61 countries represented as a part of Biosummit 4.0. So it's an incredible global event, and again, huge energy from all of you. All of the various tracks that, again, are represented this year as well, and then some, including global collaborations, responding to COVID, learning and education, and so on. And then, again, all of the incredible speakers and you all critically, and all of your major contributions. So as I said, like last year, this year we've done Hello World. I hope if you look on the Biosummit website and also in the Slack, you'll see a link to join. And actually, if somebody can put into the chat right now the Hello World, that'd be great.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Amanda Obidike, and I'm the strategy lead of STEMI Makers Africa. I am from Lagos, Nigeria, proudly African. Welcome to the Global Community Biosummit. Thank you.
So everyone, I hope you'll hop over into the Biosummit Flipgrid. So again, I can't see the chat, but hopefully we put a link there so you all can record your own Hello World, and we're actually going to play them during the break. Also, look at the incredible biocreation station from last year. Just gorgeous, the amount of work that was put into this. And we have the biocreation station this year as well. I think there may still even be an opportunity to contribute to this. So I'll defer to the other organizers. You can put it in the chat if it is still possible to submit. But this is a huge thing that we had last year. And then our workshops as well, right? Which again, this year is another huge part about Biosummit, being able to share all of your incredible research and work through demonstrations and so on with the community. Last year as well, and this year as well, we had a governance exercise. Again, each year we do some act of co-creation, and much like last year, this year as well, we'll talk a lot about structure, right? What are the different ways in which we might be able to have some type of definition around the larger movement? And we'll talk about this again later on in the morning. And now I want to share with you guys, last year was our Fellows 2.0 class. I just want to share you a really beautiful video featuring our fellows from last year and them going through and sharing the statement of shared purpose. So here we go.
Madame.
Jambo.
Bonjour.
Hi.
Hey.
Namaste.
Servus.
Vanakkam.
Pierite.
Hey everyone. Hello.
Kekwanu.
Our shared purpose
Is to fundamentally
transform life sciences
And democratize
biotechnology
to inspire
creativity
and improve life.
by organizing life science
change makers
and by enthusiasts to build
an inclusive global network.
Cultivate an accessible commons of knowledge.
resources,
launch community labs,
and projects and enable local educators.
To go out to the bang, woo, I'm gonna play some funk music for you now.
That's honestly one of my favorite videos in the world. If you want to start feeling a little better about life in the world, watch that video. It's actually on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it anytime you like. But huge love to our Fellows 2.0 class. Again, just such a special group and such incredible leaders. The other thing that we did last year at Biosummit for the first time was our very first proceeding. So I really want to shout out Justice Walker and the incredible squad that built our first ever written documentation of the Biosummit. And we are going to do that again this year at Biosummit 5.0 as well. So, we'd love for your participation and help there. And that all brings us to Biosummit 5.0. Again, shout outs to Pat for these awesome graphics and this event today. Believe it or not, everybody, we had more than 700 people applied to be accepted to the Biosummit this year. Okay, so a huge, huge global participation, even with the world opening back up again for this virtual event. This is the biggest number of people who've had apply to be a part, which is really crazy. And so over the course of the next 3 days, again, I really hope you all get the chance to interact with as many of you as possible, because there are so many of you. And again, having us all being able to engage and work together is such a pleasure and an honor. Much like previous Biosummits, we have a huge amount of content for you over the next 3 days, okay? We have more than 190 participant-led talks, panels, exhibitions, and workshops over the course of the next 3 days, okay? It's a huge amount of stuff, all right? All of you are prolific, and again, I really, really am so excited for everything that's about to unfold. Much like the past 2 years, we have an incredible group of Fellows 3.0. We'll talk about them a lot more later on, but just to show their beautiful faces and share a little bit of their energy right now, here they are. And so talking about Biosummit 5.0 and what we're all going to do together, okay? We'll spend a moment now to talk about our culture and our community agreements, okay? So one of the huge parts about Biosummit, as you all have kind of heard me say so far, but it's participation, right? You can already see in our chat right now, you know, all of the activity. We really hope that you join us in all of the different activities, discuss, be active on our Slack, be active in our chat, be active in all the different sessions. This conference is ultimately about you. So take this opportunity, put yourself out of your comfort zones and participate. Next one, Brave Space. This is another place where for Biosummit, we really want to have those potentially uncomfortable conversations, right? There's so many people here with honestly very different viewpoints around all kinds of topics, right? But our ability to be authentic, to create a safe space for us to share, a brave space for us to share is really, really important. So we really encourage you all to participate and be brave. Be open, be respectful. Again, so many different opinions on different topics. So be open-minded and know that we're all coming at this with you know, really, really strong and positive intentions. So we really encourage all of you to be as open and respectful as possible over the course of the next 3 days. Step up and step back. This is a really good one. For those of you that are a little bit more shy and a little bit more reserved, this is your time to step up. We really encourage you to, you know, add your voices to the conversation, participate, and really, really be active in engaging. And then on the flip side, for those of you that are always very used to having your voices heard all the time and you always need to raise your hand, maybe this is a time for you to actually take a little step back to create space for others to share. So that's step up, step back. Stay on time. This is going to be a big challenge. I know I'm already probably running a little bit late on time, so we're going to try our very, very best to stay on time. This will be true in all of your sessions as well. We talked about being patient and being flexible. So again, I really encourage you all to do that to the best of your abilities. And gratitude is another huge, huge part about the Biosummit, okay? So let's get ready to, again, we have all practice giving some snaps and some love to each other. If you guys made it so far, yes, this is really, really good. So just share that energy. We really, really want to express a lot of gratitude at the Biosummit. And if you guys have other community agreements, feel free to share them in the chat right now. And we can also continue this conversation on the Slack, okay? So this is just a little bit about our culture. And now I want to spend a moment here on what's called Code of Conduct, okay? Biosummit is a very, very special space. It's a very, very special intentional gathering. And for all of you here, we want to ensure that our participant safety is paramount, okay? So we have a really wonderful Code of Conduct team, and myself, Maria, Derek, and others are part of that team. And so critically, if you see this orange background, that means that that person is an organizer. And so if there is an issue, if there are any kinds of moments where you do feel unsafe or observe something that occurs that makes you uncomfortable in any way, please send an email to codeofconduct@biosummit.org. We'll be monitoring that email, or contact any of the organizers, okay? They will then kind of initiate a process that we have in the background so that we can address any kinds of code of conduct issues, okay? We don't anticipate anything happening, but again, should there be any kind of discomfort or if folks feel unsafe in any way, please send us that email and or just reach out to any of the organizers here shown with the orange background, okay? Next up, again, this is a very, very hacker or prototyping type of a conference. We're building this plan while we fly it. Again, a lot of things may go wrong. Things may go a little bit late. Workshops may not work as well as you thought. The Zoom room may crash, okay? So be patient, be flexible, but remember that everything is awesome and Biosummit is gonna be awesome. So embrace all of that with your hearts, minds, and spirits as we go forward. Okay, and so now I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second here, so that I can show you all the crazy, incredible website for just a couple of minutes, and I'm almost done. So if you all hopefully have had a chance now to visit our website at biosummit.live. And so if you've had a chance to visit that website, one of the really beautiful things about this website, again, designed by our very own Alex Perlman, you'll notice, and the password is microbes rule with a capital M, by the way. So if organizers, if you don't mind putting that information in the chat, you'll notice that each one of these cell organelles, okay, we've got the nucleus, the ribosome, et cetera, they all have a Zoom room. So we are all currently right now in the nucleus. I hope you can feel the nucleus nature of the Zoom room that we're in, right? And so every single one of these Zoom rooms is associated with a cell organelle. And so if you go down to our program, you'll notice every single day, like this is day one right here, there's a cell organelle that's again matched to every single one of our program tracks. So today we've got 5 different program tracks that'll happen later on in the afternoon Eastern time: diversity and inclusion and power of community, learning and education, governance and leadership, and 2 workshop tracks. Each of these is mapped to a different cell organelle and a Zoom room, which is shown right here. So you're going to want to have this website, biosummit.live, just up. Okay, this will be an important website for you guys just to have available and set up for you in the background as you navigate the Biosummit, okay? So this is a really important thing. And as I mentioned, we have more than 190 things in this program, okay? Look at the program, spend some time with it. There is a massive amount of stuff. This is the plenary right here, but after this is over and at 2 o'clock Eastern time, and actually for the workshop starting at 1 o'clock Eastern time, you'll start to be able to visit these different Zoom rooms and all of the incredible programming that we have. And just today, we've got 3 big tracks and then 2 workshop tracks. So many cool items that are in all of these different Zoom rooms. So you're all gonna have your hands full with a huge amount of stuff, okay? And so please spend a bunch of time looking at the website. It's really beautiful. We've got, you know, all of the participants are shown here. We've got this really nice welcome kit. Oop, I need to log in apparently. But all of our participants, you all are shown here. A welcome kit, again, the biocreation station, all of the workshops, all of this is right here linked in this beautiful, beautiful web page. So all of the different sessions are shown here. Again, here's the biocreation station, which hopefully there may be opportunity for you still to add to all of our workshops and so on, okay? So huge amount of incredible work from our team in pulling this together. So now let me just go back to my slides. Give me one moment, everybody, apologies. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. Just give me 1 second here, everybody. I'm so sorry. Okay. Too many screens open. All right, let me share my screen again. Okay. So we talked about the Zoom rooms. We've talked about our programming. So this is day 1. Day 2, again, open innovation, bioart and design, guardianship of ecosystems, youth and sciences, all part of day 2. Day 3, again, more wonderful program tracks, all organized for you right here. So have a look in the program and you guys can dive in, all right? Huge aspect of Biosummit is our Slack. Every single one of you should have gotten an email invitation to be a part of the Slack. So you'll notice as well that every single one of the program tracks has its own Slack channel, okay? So what's gonna happen is once we get into our program tracks in the afternoon Eastern time, you're all gonna be in different Zoom rooms. Things are just gonna run out of time. You're not gonna have enough time to get to all the stuff that you wanna get to. And so the way to continue the conversation is go onto the Slack and actually engage there. So for organizers, as a reminder as well, for those of you that are chat moderators and organizers, remind everybody to put links and put all of your notes and other special items into the Slack channels, okay? Many of you have already been using it, which is great. You can head over right now to BS5 introductions and introduce yourself and start engaging there. And the organizers have already been starting to advertise the various tracks and talks inside that hashtag general channel, okay? So hop over to the chat and the Slack and spend a bunch of time on there. Thank you, Sarah, for also putting the link to the Slack in the chat. So please do check that out. We're going to do something a little new this year. We're going to experiment with something called Spatial Chat during our breaks. So this will be a fun little experiment that we're actually going to do in about half an hour when we have our first break. We're all going to hop into a virtual space and try to talk with each other there. So we're doing a little some experiments with how to engage with each other socially. So hopefully that will be a lot of fun. And again, a little bit later on and throughout the Biosummit, we're going to have this governance exercise set up. Okay, we're going to do this all together at the end of our morning session. And then also later today in the governance track, we're going to have another devoted hour we can spend more time on this, exercise. Biosummit is also about celebration, okay? A huge part about Biosummit is celebration. And again, a huge part of, I think, of every movement and every great movement is all about all of us getting together and being able to dance, laugh, and really experience joy. So Saturday night, we're gonna have a really great party. Shout outs to DJ Philip Tan and DJ Norasaurus, who are going to play some funky beats. I'll play a little set in there as well. So please do join us Saturday evening. We'll be right here in the Nucleus for a party. So get your costumes ready, get your people ready and your dancing shoes ready, because we are going to have a really great time Saturday night. We also have an open mic. So shout outs to Maria Chavez. Maria, if you don't mind dropping into the chat right now a link to the open mic sign up. This is something that all of you will have the opportunity to share something, a talent of yours, something from your culture, as a bit of music, a poem, whatever you like. We're going to have an open mic this evening right here in the Nucleus starting at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and also at Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern time as well. So we'll have 2 nights where we're going to have an open mic. So please join us. There's plenty of slots to sign up, and you'll have an opportunity to sign up throughout the day. So look out in the chat too. We'll drop the link, the sign up link into the chat right now. So that is the open mic. And again, shout outs to Justice and the entire squad for the proceedings, which we'll get into. Remember, because there is a huge amount of stuff, I actually forgot more than 200 things, there's going to be FOMO, okay? You're not going to be able to get to all of the stuff. There's just too many things. So know, though, that later on, we are going to have all of these sessions will be put onto YouTube later on. So you will be able to watch all of this later on, but just know that that's not going to happen. And that's also okay. Right? There are too many things happening in the world. Take some deep breaths. We're going to do a little bit of yoga together later this morning as well. So breathe deep and relax, because we're all going to have a really enjoyable time, even if we can't see everything. And I see Maria's dropped the open mic sign up as well now. So please do have a look at that. And so as I wrap up, a huge thank you to all of our sponsors, to Millipore Sigma, Ginkgo Bioworks, Waters Corporation, the John W. Henry Family Foundation. We truly could not do Biosummit without you and all of your incredible support. To the Media Lab for being a virtual host of this event. So thank you all again to our incredible sponsor group. We really appreciate all of your support. But most importantly, a huge thank you again to our entire organizing team, okay? Just massive love to this group. And again, if you guys don't all mind virtually, just to give some claps, snaps, applause, some emoji love to our entire organizing team, truly. It's a massive effort and undertaking, and it would not be possible without each and every one of you. So thank you all so much for all of your support. And so with that, everybody, I'm gonna close this these opening remarks just by saying, you know, we're in some really challenging times in the world right now. I think, you know, we're facing environmental crises, so many other issues around, you know, poverty and inequality and scarcity of resources, and so many socio-political, cultural challenges. And to me, I think, you know, one of the things that gives me so much hope for the world is the Biosummit, is you all. I personally believe that for us to really navigate some of these major global challenges, we need global solutions, and we need global communities working together with as much enthusiasm and spirit and heart as we possibly can. So I know for myself, this event every year is such a huge source of inspiration. And I hope each of you, you know, takes this time to just appreciate each other and really build and support each other, because we're going to need it. And in the years and decades to come, and hopefully Biosummit can be a part of helping to create some of that shape and some of those connections, so that all of us don't feel so alone, right? And that we recognize that any one of us together can really accomplish and really make a huge difference in this world. So everybody, let's change the world, and let's have an amazing Biosummit 3.0. Okay, so thank you guys. That was my opening remarks. And again, really hope that you all have an incredible event over the next 3 days. So with that, we're going to shift into our first set of keynote and plenary remarks for our first session. So our first session here is on diversity, inclusion, and empower of community. And we're going to kick off the official portion of Biosummit with something really special. So one of our dear community members is shown here. This is LaDonna Bravebull, who is one of the leaders from the Standing Rock movement in the United States. And LaDonna has been a huge, huge part of our community and our movement. LaDonna gave the opening keynote address at the 2018 Biosummit and the closing keynote address, and was just a huge, huge part of our movement in 2018. And last year as well, in 2020, gave our opening address as well. And LaDonna is such a fierce, incredible leader, truly a visionary person, and a real movement builder and organizer. And LaDonna sadly passed away earlier this year. And so, from brain cancer. And it was a really very sad, acute, sad moment for all of us in our movement. And so, when LaDonna passed away, and this is just, again, her physical body, her spirit lives on 10,000%. LaDonna was somebody that had such a huge impact in our community. And so we asked ourselves, is there a way that we might be able to recognize and remember LaDonna for her incredible contributions to our movement? Again, LaDonna's made such a huge impact to so many movements, but for ours in particular. And so we talked about it, and we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could actually establish an award that could be potentially named after her and in the spirit of LaDonna? And, at one of the Biosummits, and I think the very first Biosummit that LaDonna was at, I remember, I'll never forget this moment where she looked out at the crowd of all of us in the audience and said, "You know what you all are? You're not just scientists, you're science activists." Okay, you're science activists. You're not just here trying to do science, you're really here trying to change the world. And that's something that I'll never forget her saying, and it made a really profound impact on me. And so after LaDonna passed away, we spent some time engaging with LaDonna's family and asked them, would it be okay for us to actually create an award named after LaDonna that we would call the LaDonna Bravebull Science Activist Award? And so, LaDonna's son, Freedom, was so lovely, wrote back to us and said, yes, the one thing that LaDonna wanted more than anything, she wanted us to figure out how to combine the old ways with the new ways, how to ultimately sprinkle seeds of change all around the world. And so with the family's blessing, I'm so excited to announce that for the very first time at Biosummit, we have created the very first LaDonna Bravebull Science Activist Award. And again, I want to just acknowledge Pat Nuttaporn again for creating this incredibly beautiful logo and design. This has the fist in the air, which again is just so kind of symbolic of LaDonna and her posture and pose, and incorporates so many beautiful design elements. And LaDonna, we love you so much. We miss you, but we know that you're here with us right now. And what I'd love to do right now is to share a little surprise and play a quick little video, which was created by Nell Schaefer from our community with some words from LaDonna.
And I would say to them one thing: can you feel it? Can you feel that power that comes right out of the earth up into you? Can you feel that power that's here and has always been here to heal us? Can you feel what the earth has given us? What are you giving back? I truly believe that change comes from just standing up. Just standing up. Even if you're standing by yourself, you're standing up. And if you can stand up for one thing that's important to you, you can change what's happening around you. Everybody has that one thing that they can stand up for. Everybody needs to support everybody.
So I think you guys all know, for those who've been to Biosummit, I get really emotional at the end of Biosummit, but this is my first time I might actually cry at the start of Biosummit. Really just miss and love LaDonna so much. And again, the ability for us to recognize and have LaDonna live on with us at the Biosummit going forward, I think is something I'm so happy about. And so everybody, I hope you will all stand up, if not physically, at least in spirit, as I proudly announce the first recipient of the LaDonna Bravebull Science Activist Award. And that is none other than everybody, could you please, I'm gonna just exit my screen here and stop sharing. Could you guys all please unmute and stand up if you like? I'm going to stand, and let's just give a huge round of applause for Jean-Luc.
Yeah.
All right, Jean-Luc.
So everybody, oh man, I'm gonna cry. Jean-Luc is such a special individual, such a special member of our community. Jean-Luc has been a part of the Biosummit, I think, since the very beginning, since the very first year, and I think truly embodies all of the values that we think of when we talk about science activism. Jean-Luc, in addition to being a part of the Biosummit, has been a huge part of the Fab Foundation and the digital fabrication movement. He's been a major leader at the Fab Foundation, engaging the communities there, and obviously through his work at the Biosummit. Jean-Luc is also a member of our Fellows program this year, the Community BioFellows 3.0 program, and also one of our organizers with the Power of Community group and the Diversity and Inclusion group. And actually, it's funny, you know, every single week when we have our meetings, you know, we're always like, hey, you know, where's Jean-Luc? And Jean-Luc is never like in Boston. I was like, oh yeah, I'm actually in Washington, DC right now for the Indigenous Peoples Action. It's like, oh, where are you right now, Jean-Luc? Oh, I'm actually at COP26 right now. So I'm engaging in a climate action right now. Truly, when we think about science activism, there's nobody else that I could think of more represents that spirit. And Jean-Luc also was close as well with LaDonna. So Jean-Luc, just it's such an honor to know you. We're so thrilled and honored that you could be the first recipient of this award. So Jean-Luc, I'll turn it over to you now to give some remarks. And yeah, thank you so much, Jean-Luc.
Thank you, David. And as is our practice at the North American Indian Center of Boston, it is first within our protocol to recognize the land on which we're on, the land that holds us, the land that sustains us. And so I am calling from the traditional indigenous territory of the Massachusetts Nation, who continue to this day in part through their lineal descendants, the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog. And in recognizing land and recognizing the people, we are making agreements with our hosts. We are making agreements such as supporting every effort by the tribe to rematriate land and natural resources back to the original peoples. And so with that, I'd like to pass the word to Allison, who has a brief offering for us. Allison, are you there?
I'm here.
You might need to turn your background off, Allison. You faded into it.
Sorry, I need to start. Te horai mai te rangi. Te horai mai te rangi. Te horai mai. Mau, mau, mau te ua whiti mai te rā. Mau, mau, mau te ua whiti mai te rā. Erere kotare. Erere kotare ki runga puwhara whara ruru pariro ke mate te ua. Ruru pariro pe ate te ua. Erere enoke. Erere enoke mai o topo kura kai ke te wai ke mate te ua. Kai ke te wai kai mate te ua. E whiti mai te rā. E whiti mai te rā.
Tikach, Allison. Going to share my screen now. Thank you, Mom, for being here. Thank you, everybody else that that has joined us. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about roots in water, hydrotropism as a theory of change. And as you can see on this introductory slide, I have a picture at our team and our community from the North American Indian Center of Boston at the first signing of Indigenous Peoples Day here within the city of Boston, thanks in part to Mayor Kim Janey, but also to the leadership of our women. My journey into this world, in 2018, that iteration of Global Community Biosummit, I believe it was 2.0. A few days before I arrived, my grandmother, Fanny Lupin, Pierite, walked on. She was the first Choctaw woman to graduate from a 4-year college in Mississippi. She was the first Choctaw woman to teach at a white school. Coming into Biosummit, I actually saw LaDonna sitting in that room in which all of our family photos are taken. And she was just sort of holding court and telling stories and everything. And I introduced myself to her. And I said, you know, I'm from the Tunica Biloxi tribe, and Biloxi is Siouan, and so Lakota and Biloxi, you know, we're related by language. And she said, no, we're not. She says, don't you see, like, we're cousins. And so I just, in that moment, I knew coming into Biosummit that even though I had a wound that was healing and I was grieving, I was coming into a space in which I was being held, I was given that grandmother energy. Going all the way back to the beginning of how I was introduced into this world, I actually started as a temporary executive assistant to Neil Gershenfeld at the Center for Bits and Atoms. And it was there that I helped to organize a workshop in May of 2014 called Bits to Biology, talking about not just analog to digital conversion, but biological to digital conversion. And so that for me was sort of like my genealogy coming into this sort of global community Biosummit world. After my entry into the Fab Foundation, I started with the Institute for Collaborative Language Research, or CoLang, 2014 at University of Texas in Arlington. It was there that I was introduced to another collaborative network of academics and community language activists, all centered around providing tools and access to communities to do language documentation towards language revitalization projects, such as those back home in Marksville, Louisiana, with the Tunica Biloxi tribe language and culture revitalization program. Unbeknownst to me, also in 2014 was Fab 10, and there was a button that was pressed in Fab Lab Barcelona that started a 40-year countdown towards urban sustainability under the Fab City initiative. You can see Tomas and Neil Gershenfeld. Behind that exit pillar is a very important clock, and it's still ticking to this day, challenging cities worldwide to at least produce 50% of goods locally that are consumed within the cities. Going to the next slide here. So then going from Fab 10 to Fab 11, and sort of my entry into sort of the FabX conference world. And this is where I actively started becoming one of the organizers of the FabX series of conferences. I'm here in the Symphony Hall in Boston during the Fab Symposium, during a musical interlude. It was sort of my first time that I formally shared what my family has done for all of my life, which is share our language, share our culture, share our stories, share our songs. And whenever I sing, regardless of whether I'm away from home, I'm always singing with the voices of my mom and my sister joining me, all of my family, and my uncle and my aunts and everybody that has contributed to the overall effort. returning to Kolang in 2016. This time it was in 24 hours of daylight in Fairbanks, Alaska. And this was when I was able to bring my sister into the fold, further bringing more tools and more access to our community while networking with Alaska Natives that were also organizing for the same thing. And not only is it a concern about language and culture for Pacific Northwest and Mississippi, the Gulf of Mexico, that Gulf Coast, but also our communities are affected by climate change as well. I remember speaking with the Tlingit elder and saying, just understanding one of her projects about recording language and recording names of months. And she says, well, you know, I recorded this name of this one month and it says, you know, when the bears come out, but that doesn't make sense anymore because the bears have already come out. And so you see language loss and the need for preserving our traditional knowledge is exacerbated by climate change. It's a vicious cycle. That was one revelation from that. Going from 24 hours of daylight to Shenzhen, China, in Fab 12, I started to collaborate with Walter Gonzalez Arnau in a human loom, a dynamic human loom, in which every conference since then we've been in a Fabersize, we've been tossing out spools of yarn, hilos, into the crowds, and then having the people just sort of weave and weft this fabric just on the spot. And it has been something that has been beautiful and collaborative and just blossomed over time. Also in 2016, I was called to serve in a moon dance ceremony. I'm here with my brother, Firekeepers. Fourth from the left is my brother Jaguar, or Brandon King. During the night, 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm dozing off by the fire, and I start to drift into dreaming. And then all of a sudden I hear off to my left a voice saying, yeah, there are these spaces. They have laser cutters, they have 3D printers, they have milling machines. And I jump up and it's Brandon Jaguar. And I said, what are you talking? Are you talking about a Fab Lab? And he says, yes. Are you talking about the MIT Fab Labs? And he says, yes. And so now the ceremonial and the physical, the spiritual, everything, it was starting to blend together. Little did I know when I handed him my signed copy of Mel King's Chain of Change, and sent him back off to Cooperation Jackson, that he would then go to EAC in Barcelona and Fab Lab Barcelona to do a knowledge exchange between Fab Lab Barcelona, Fab City Initiative, and Cooperation Jackson just a month after that. And so all of these worlds were converging, very much so in Fab 13, Santiago de Chile. I'm going to save that story for another time because I want to make sure that I get to a couple more slides. 2018, I'm bringing back some of the resources, bringing back some of the tools. Now I'm in my time of service as president of the North American Indian Center of Boston. And we were studying the digital divide for urban indigenous peoples. And we said, why don't we not just study it? Why don't we do something about it? Boston Makers was about to become a homeless organization. So we brought them into our community center, and we, through a MOU, made accessible complimentary memberships for our community members, the New England Native American community. And then also that month, I went with Sherry Lassiter and Sarah Boisvert to Santa Fe Community College to further advocate for Fab Lab programming in Native communities. Unbeknownst to me, I would have some of my Choctaw cousins that were there, and it was a very pleasant surprise. But then I brought it all back home in April 2019 through Tarukanto, through a grant from the Administration for Native Americans. We have a cohort of language apprentices, young adults that their full-time job is to learn their language and to teach their language. And so we collaborated on a digital design workshop aimed at middle schoolers, in which they were collaborating on designs of fantastical animals and digitizing those designs, cutting those out of stickers and vinyl, and then presenting all of their ideas to their parents all in one afternoon. It was a very beautiful experience. And so I'm going to stop here. If I went through the next 2 years, it would take another 30 minutes. But the spring of 2019, the 18th session of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues was the last time that I saw LaDonna. And I was set to testify, but I had some hiccups in my access to the permanent forum. Emails, phone calls, everything was all in the mix. I was outside of security, just fuming and frustrated and wondering what was I going to do. Up the streets of New York walks LaDonna to me. And she said, I tell her everything that's going on. And she says to me, and it's probably the last thing that she ever said to me, don't give up. You must never give up. You must insist. And so when I'm talking about roots and water as a theory of change, I want you to, in summary, I don't want you to think of yourselves as science activists in the role of the roots or the water, but think of yourselves as the soil. Think of yourselves as something that the roots pass through in order to get to the source of the water. Think of yourself as something that holds the roots up and supports the roots. And in your moments of frustration, remember, as LaDonna told to me, never give up. You must insist. Thank you.
Everyone, can we give one more round of applause to Jean-Luc Pierite? Jean-Luc, thank you so much again for your incredible words and just for all of the work that you've done over the years and for hearing that story. I did not know that story about you and LaDonna at the end there. That's a really incredible and special moment. Everybody, we are actually just about right on time. So thank you again to Jean-Luc and all of our organizers for getting us to this point. We are going to take a little break right now, actually. So what we would like to do is for the next 25 minutes or so, we can stretch and take a little break. But we're actually going to set up something called Spatial Chat and let you all have an opportunity to kind of meet each other and engage each other in a virtual environment. So Desiree, if you are there, do you want to put the link to Spatial Chat inside the chat?
Sure. David, was I also supposed to introduce Power of
You know
Community?
what? You are so right. I am so glad that we have you to remind me about that, Jessica. Yes. Jessica, can you have just a quick little introduction for what we're going to see later on the track? That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. And thank you, Jean-Luc. You're such a powerful and amazing person. And we'd love to keep that energy going in the Power of Community and Diversity and Inclusion track. We're going to kick it off with a truly global panel on starting and sustaining community labs. And then we'll see a talk from Seeding Labs, which is an amazing organization which builds community by getting unwanted lab equipment to partner labs in the developing world. We have a section called Planting Seeds, Building Community, which is right in line with this track about plant biotech and food in our community labs. And then we have a session on engaging our communities and different ways to do that. And then we'll have a panel or a session on diversity and inclusion moderated by Anita. And we'll wrap that up with a panel on SynBio across the world. So hope to see you all there. It's going to be amazing. And we're going to show community lab video walkthroughs during our breaks.
Okay, Jessica, thank you. And I apologize for missing that, but thank you so much for sharing. So everybody, again, 2 o'clock, and it is going to be in which room? Let's just see. It's going to be in the ribosome. So 2 p.m. in the ribosome, everybody come and hang out with us with D&I and Power Community. It is going to be epic, yes. So with that, everyone, why don't we head into a break? And so again, Desiree, if you're there, let's put the Spatial Chat link into the chat and let's give this a shot. For those of you that want to try this, we can head over now. Just be sure to mute yourself on Zoom and then head over into Spatial Chat and just try it out. It'll be a bit of an experiment. And then for others, if you want to hang out here in the Zoom room, that's great as well. We're going to play Hello World and have that set up for you guys while we take a break. So if you guys don't mind, come back here at 10:25 Eastern time if you can, just 5 minutes beforehand. And at 10:30 p.m. sharp, or 10:30 a.m. sharp, we're going to get started with learning and education and 2 wonderful talks there. So everybody, please enjoy your break, and we will be back in just about 20 minutes. All right, everybody, we can start turning our videos back on again. We're going to get started in 2 minutes with a session on learning and education. Really quickly, while we're coming out of the break, does anybody have any questions so far about the format or the logistics or any other kind of technical aspects of the program? I saw a question in the chat about when the workshops begin, and that's actually a really good point. The workshops are actually going to begin at 1 p.m. Eastern time, so they're going to begin right as the governance exercise ends. So actually, also for organizers, if you guys are helping to organize one of the workshops, I remember at 12:30, when the governance exercise starts, feel free to open up those Zoom rooms and get the workshops going. But does anybody have any questions so far about any logistics or any other items that might need clarifying? You can feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer. Also, while we're getting started up again, we can do a little Zoom chat icebreaker. So if you guys want to put into the Zoom chat your favorite organisms and why, I think we can spend a little moment on that. So if anybody has thoughts on their favorite organisms and why. All right, we have a vote for fungi from Olivia. Olivia, why do you like fungi? You can put that in the chat. Mycelium. So you guys know we have Juliana Furci from the Fungi Foundation who'll be kicking off tomorrow morning. Juliana is a total force of nature. We've got a vote for cyanobacteria from Yasmina, Calibacter, magnetotactic bacteria. Oh, this is good. Olivia, I'm also extremely excited for Juliana's talk. It's going to be so good. So many votes for fungi. This is all very, very good. Oh, now we're getting some good guard. The Asgard archaea, cuttlefish, midichlorian, BH with midichlorians. I love it. Okay, everybody. Well, why don't we get started since we're at 10:30 now. So if Justice Walker is in the building, I'm going to turn it over to Justice now to introduce our session on learning and education. So everybody, can we all give some Biosummit love, some claps, some snaps, some emojis for Justice Walker?
Thanks, David.
Let's go, Justice.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. And if we can get a spotlight on Justice too, that'd be great.
Excellent. And so I'm, over the moon to be able to share with you all that we have some exciting things in plan for you and in store. Early on, we recognized that most of you in the Biosummit history, in your efforts to democratize life science, took conscious steps in education, often thinking about the generation of innovators and scientists and citizens ahead. And so with that and a team of really incredible organizers, we identified the perfect sort of voices to galvanize us to action. We asked the question, what does it mean to construct meaningful relationships in teaching and education? And I'll hand it over now to Anja Scholze, who will get us started in thinking about that question at the start with our keynotes and throughout, threaded in the track. And so without further ado, Anja, can you take it away and introduce our first keynote?
Sure thing. Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes, excellent news. Good to start off that way. I'm so excited for Biosummit time. This is always the best time of the year. And I have the great honor of introducing our first keynote speaker for the Learning and Education track. So today we are so excited to be joined by Paulo Blikstein, who is a pioneer in the learning and education fields. An engineer by training, he holds a PhD in the learning sciences from Northwestern University, a master's from the MIT Media Lab, and was on the faculty at the Graduate School of Education at Stanford University for 10 years. Currently, Paulo is an associate professor of education, technology, and design at Columbia University's Teachers College. His research over the years has focused on how technologies can transform the learning of science, computer science, and engineering, and focuses on the applications of data mining and AI for learning, which admittedly I did steal from an online, Paulo's own bios, and is an intriguing phrase that I would love to know so much more about. And for his amazing work, Paulo is the recipient of the National Science Foundation Early Career Award and the AERA Jan Hawkins Early Career Award. He holds patents for his work on Google Blocks, a tangible programming toolkit for preschool children, and is founder of the Stanford Lehman Center for Brazilian Education, a 10-year initiative to transform public education in Brazil. So has done a lot. And in relation to our work and as a community bio movement, Paulo in 2010 created the first research-based program to bring makerspaces to schools, the FabLearn project, and currently runs the sort of annual FabLearn conference. And this maker movement is a really close relative of our community bio movement, as both of us share an ethos of democratizing technologies and placing them in the hands of citizens for transformative action towards more equitable access, innovation, and economies. And for our track, the Learning and Education track, this movement obviously begins with education. And so last year we heard a keynote from Yasmin about a playbook for getting biodesign and biotechnologies into K-12 education. And today's keynotes will continue that conversation, starting with Paulo talking about subversion in educational technologies. And I can't wait to hear more. So with that, let's get started, and I'll hand it over to Paulo.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
We can.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Thank you all for inviting me for this talk. I've always had a crush on the Biosummit, but I was shy to approach you. So it's really great that I got invited this time. I love what you do, and I hope to bring some interesting questions for us to talk about today. So I will share my screen if that's okay. But before that, I just want to talk about my own positionality. So I am a Brazilian immigrant, a Latin American immigrant in the US. I don't have citizenship, and I'm of Jewish descent. And I'm saying that because there are people from all over the world here, and often in the US, I feel that there are too few categories and boxes where people are put. And so I think it's important for us to talk about alternative identities and positionality. So, I'm a Jewish Latin American immigrant with no citizenship. So now let me share my screen. And so I'm going to talk about emancipatory design. And as you might have realized, emancipation is a concept that I bring from Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire is one of the most important scholars, educators of the 20th century, also a Brazilian, just like me. And what is emancipation for Paulo Freire? So what he defines as emancipation is it's part of humans, our ontological vocation to change the world. So he believes that we are born with this instinct to make things better, to change the world, to improve our lives, our communities' lives, and that every force that that acts to limit what you can do to transform the world is an oppressive force. And that emancipation is the process of going from where you are, the here and now, and what he calls the consciousness of the real. So you're kind of imprisoned in the here and now, and you cannot see what's possible, to the consciousness of the possible, where you realize your full potential and you realize you can do lots of things. And every time you are impeded to realize this ontological vocation of doing stuff out in the world, changing or realizing your full potential, there are forces of oppression that are limiting what you can do. So emancipation is a really key thing for education, because that's what it should be about. It should be about setting people on a trajectory to realize their full potential, to change their lives, their communities' lives, because Paulo Freire believes this is our vocation as humans. And I think that's a beautiful thing to say. Well, so to design education technologies or education environments or learning environments, to do that, there are a few things we should do and we should not do. So I will start with things we should not do, because that's depressive, and we want to, start with that and end in a higher note. So what not to do? So 4 things. First thing is, you should, and this is, remember there is a don't at the beginning of those sentences. So don't ignore the historical construction of the EdTech discourse of disruption. And, there are some authors you can read. There's a great book by Andrew Waters just published on this. But what is this discourse of disruption? So this is this idea that, education sucks, it's terrible, and technology will save it, will fix it. And often when you look at what a lot of these EdTech disruptors and revolutionaries and visionaries, what they actually propose is something embarrassingly trivial. But the discourse is constructed in a way that it looks amazing. So, for example, look at, try to watch Salman Khan's presentation, TED Talk in 2013, where he presents his video-based learning. And he talks about how it's going to revolutionize schooling and learning and everything. But what he's really describing, his real invention is the rewind button. So his whole claim is that by rewinding videos, we're going to revolutionize education. But it's really hard to understand that that's the only innovation there if you don't pay attention to the discourse that's constructed around a trivial and mundane invention. So if you start looking at EdTech in this way, you realize that, 80% of the innovations and the disruptions, everything, are trivial, mundane things embellished by, this carefully constructed discourse. And surprisingly, those kinds of things get, they get like hundreds of millions of dollars to implement rewind buttons and pause buttons and things like that. So be aware of this discourse, and don't engage in it, but also, pay attention to so that you know what's going on, and see if the innovations are real or if it's just like, trivialities coated in a nice with nice words and Silicon Valley-esque things. Second thing is don't forget the don't there. Don't engage in cycles of perpetual failure. So this is from a very interesting author, Sims, and his theory, and based on work from many other people, including Foucault and Ferguson, is that in many of this kind of educational or development projects, especially in the developing world, you see like the World Bank and all kinds of institutions trying to fix, stuff in the developing world, and you wonder why isn't it fixed? They've been trying for 100 years or whatever. And the theory is that this is actually on purpose. On purpose, not that there's one person deciding, but it's a sort of a tacit agreement, because Sims says that there are beneficiaries of failure. So there are institutions that actually benefit from the failure of, development projects or education projects. For example, universities. Universities are beneficiaries of the failure to fix education, because then the funding keeps coming, right? NGOs, the World Bank, the international organizations, and all of that, those institutions, they depend on the cycles of perpetual failure. If we ever fix STEM education in the US, we're all out of a job. So what's interesting, I think, in this vision is that we should be aware of this and be careful not to engage in this kind of cycle of perpetual failure. And the way you engage in it is by promising what's impossible to be delivered. So you say, I'm going to fix education in just a couple of years with my new technology. And we know it's much more complicated than that. And then you get there and it's not realized, and you say, oh, I just need more funding. If I just have more money, I can fix it. And we've been going like this for a long time. So be aware and be careful with this engagement in cycles of perpetual failure, and don't be a beneficiary of failure. Do things that are done, that are doable, and move on to the next thing. Number 3, don't misunderstand your mistakes and the feedback from the world. So again, we sort of live in a world where failure is glorified. So yeah, I used to live in the Silicon Valley, and people would say, failure is amazing. We should all be making mistakes all the time. Fail forward, fail often, whatever. I mean, but sometimes when you fail, I mean, this discourse is constructed in a way that it's like when you fail, you just have to keep trying and keep trying, be persistent and have grit. And, eventually you'll get there. What sometimes is missing from this discourse is that sometimes your idea is actually terrible. It's just a bad idea. That's why you failed. It's not because the world is unfair and whatever. So the point here is like, sometimes the world is giving you good feedback that your idea is not great, or that your conception of the system you're trying to change is insufficient. So when the world is giving you feedback, listen to it, pay attention to it, instead of saying, no, I'll just keep doing the thing and persisting forever. And eventually, I'll fix things. Sometimes your idea sucks, not the world. 4, don't oversimplify education and don't ignore resistances to learning. And that's something from Edith Ackerman, who was at the MIT Media Lab for many years, a brilliant scholar that you should. Unfortunately, she passed away a few years ago. You should read more about that, about her. But, she has a great paper about resistances to learning. So basically, the theory is that we humans, we are built to our brains come up with theories, and it's really hard to change once they're there. Just go on social media and try to convince like an anti-vaxxer that he's wrong or she's wrong. So our brain is set up in a way that once we have theories, it's very hard to change them. So don't assume that because you're going and telling kids, oh, you should, what you know about this topic is wrong. I will tell you the truth, the real deal. People will not automatically accept that. That's not how human brains are set up. We are set up to, stick to our theories until the last moment of desperation where they completely break down. So don't assume that, it's going to be simple to teach people stuff that contradicts their previous ideas, their previous knowledge. That's actually the essence of constructivism, if you want to, read more about that. So don't oversimplify education. Don't think it's about telling people the truth or making it fun, and then everybody will, engage and learn. It's complex, it's complicated, it's painful. But it's possible, and it requires, good design and good pedagogy. So let's, stop with the depressing stuff and go into maybe some more, constructive advice. So what you do? So, and here we have 5 things. First thing is start from what people really care about. And it's so easy to misunderstand what people care about. We sometimes think we know what people care about, and we often don't. So let me tell you a story of how I messed up. So this is me many years ago, and I was going to, when I was a student at MIT, and I went to do a workshop in a very low-income community in Brazil, like a slum, or we don't call it that way anymore, but a very, very, very poor part in Brazil. And I took a few Lego robotics boxes to this community, and I was going to do this robotics workshop. And I came up with this brilliant idea because Brazil was in an energy crisis at the time. I had this idea that the kids would build energy-saving devices, and because that would be super meaningful to them, super relevant. And so this is me in that first meeting. And then, you know, people started when I presented the idea, they started looking at me in a weird way. And then some guy, you know, the guy with mustache came to me and said, you know, there's a little problem with your idea, is because here in this very, you know, poor community, we don't have energy meters because, you know, we don't have money to pay for energy. So we just take like an illegal connection from the light post into our house. So we don't, you know, and also we don't have much stuff here. We cannot save energy. We barely have enough, you know, enough appliances to survive. So there is saving energy is a bit of a kind of middle class idea. It doesn't apply here. However, when we do these illegal connections, you know, that look like this, it's very dangerous because the houses can catch fire or the transformers can blow up and hurt people. So they told me that, you know, that brilliant idea I had of energy saving devices was actually meaningless to them and borderline offensive. But they had another idea, which was, you know, and this is, you know, the girls in this workshop, and they said, no, we want to create a sort of a TV program and a leaflets and a campaign in the community teaching people how to make illegal energy connections safely. And that's something I would have never imagined, you know, in my kind of middle class mind, because to me it was about saving energy. For them, it was about preventing fires by teaching people how to do illegal connections safely. Another thing is that I told you I had these Lego boxes, and I flew the Lego boxes from Cambridge to Brazil, and then the kids didn't want to play with the Lego thing. And I said, how come? This is the coolest thing ever. And said, no, this looks very expensive and we don't want to break it. And then, you know, do we have to pay for it? So it was culturally inappropriate to use Legos in that environment. And then, but then the kids said, no, we can do something else. And then they showed me that they were experts at disassembling stuff and getting parts from broken stuff, as you can see there. And so we've redesigned completely this robotics workshop to be, you know, we used still the kind of microcontroller board, but all the parts were taken from broken stuff. So we didn't use the Lego boxes at all, except for the robotic brain. And they build like absolutely wonderful projects, all with like, you know, repurposed, recycled stuff, because that was in their culture. They were experts at that, and they didn't like, you know, the Lego parts. But again, you can only see that if you go there and talk to people and get to know them and really get rid of your stereotyped views of who people are and what, you know, what they do, because they are often wrong. Second thing to do, and this is the do list, remember, is pick powerful ideas. So in biology, I mean, there are so many powerful ideas. And what are powerful ideas? They are things that and help you understand lots of things at the same time. So, you know, for example, recursion. So if you look at recursion, it's such a powerful idea because it's a simple mathematical idea that is behind, you know, how trees grow, how, you know, bacteria reproduce, how tons of shapes in nature are fractal or like recursive, I mean, are driven by recursion. In computer science, tons of things are you know, driven by recursion. Recursion is like an amazing, incredibly powerful idea because it allows you to understand tons of things. So in biology, there are so many of those ideas. So, you know, focus on those ideas instead of focusing on the kind of schoolish content of like, I want you to understand the concept of X. Instead, think about what are the really powerful ideas that sometimes are not even in the school curriculum, and sometimes are even completely outside of what people think is teachable, and focus on those ideas. And, you know, the idea of powerful ideas comes from Seymour Papert, and you can look at his book Mindstorms, where he talks about many examples of that. So pick powerful ideas when you want to design something for kids, not the idea. And those ideas sometimes are not in the curriculum, and you have to go look for them. But biology is an amazing, like, fertile territory for powerful ideas. Number 3, teach the unteachable. So sometimes people say, oh, there is stuff in the standards, international standards, we need to teach that stuff, like fractions. I mean, every time a student tells me, I want to design a system to teach fractions, I said, no, fractions are forbidden in my class because, it's teaching fractions with a physical pizza or a virtual pizza on a screen. It's not that different. And fractions is not, amazingly interesting anyways, but what are the unteachable things that we have and to teach those, we actually need new designs and new technologies. So for example, think about, networks. How do you teach about network theory? You really cannot teach without computational media. You cannot do a network graph with string and nails, and you really need a computational environment to teach about networks. And networks are absolutely fundamental to understand basically everything today, from the internet to organisms to climate change. Complex systems, so epidemiology makes no sense to study it without a computational environment for you to do simulations and for you to understand exponential growth and the waves of infection and everything. Those things are not teachable with pen and paper. They're not teachable with books because you need some kind of dynamic medium where you do simulations, where you do what-if scenarios, when you do all of those things. So when you're picking what you want to teach, look for things that actually need the technology that you want to introduce to be teachable, not stuff that is okay on pen and paper and you're just adding a digital layer to it. And there are many topics that are fall in that category. For example, climate change. It's really hard to teach with pen and paper. There's no equation for climate change. There are only computer models. So that's where you need, technology and new designs. So teaching the unteachable. 4, have achievable and precise learning goals. So often I hear people saying, I want to change people's lives. I want girls to become engineers. I want everyone to fall in love with science. I want to fix systemic racism with my new app. I mean, that's not an achievable goal with an app. That's a systemic change in society that's much larger than that. So, and often when you come up with learning goals that are much beyond what you can do, you end up, in the cycle of perpetual failure, as I said. So, having realistic goals that point to the right direction, of course, that point to changing people's lives, that contribute to girls becoming engineers if they want to, that fight systemic racism. So contributing to those things is important, but thinking that your app will change things in this way often leads to frustration. So let me talk about a few examples now of designs that I think do interesting things. So first thing, design changes who participates. So let me give you an example. So you all know the Arduino platform, and this is a very kind of down-to-earth example, but I think it's useful. So Arduino was born in the mid-2000s. There's a whole story there, but you might know this board. You can do robotics, physical computing, and all of that. You might also know the MIT, the Cricket, which was the predecessor of the Lego robotics and just the Lego robotics kit. But I want you to pay attention to one detail, which are the connectors here. So to use, the connectors of the Arduino, they were it's just a little thing, you put a wire there, and then when you look at the Lego connectors, they seem a little more sophisticated. And when you go look at the documentation of how the Lego robotics connectors were designed, and much of that was designed at the Media Lab, you see that they were looking for a connector that could be connected in any position. So there was no polarity there, right? You couldn't connect it in the wrong way. And to do that, they went to they did very complicated electronics to make sure that the kid could not connect things in the wrong way, and it could not, short circuit and everything. So, this seems like a very kind of pedestrian thing, it's just like a connector, who cares? But those kinds of details, they make all the difference when you want to define what age group can use it, how much time it takes to learn to use your platform. So those kinds of details, they define who can participate in a way. Because also, if you look at, the Arduino board, it looks very threatening. It looks that it's not for everyone. But if you look at, Lego Robotics, I have tons of criticism to Lego Robotics, but it looks more approachable and it's a lot easier to use. And another example is the actual language we use to program those kinds of things. So in the 90s at the Media Lab, they were using Logo to program, robotics. And you can see, like in the late 80s, very easy to, so if you want to make an LED blink, you have forever, then A, comma on, that's port A, turn on, wait a little bit, A, comma off, and wait a little bit. So that's, but weirdly over time that became, like the Arduino programming language, which is fantastically complicated and unnecessarily so. And that excludes people from participation in this community. So the same, if you look at what it takes to make an LED blink in Arduino, it takes like, 7 wires and a resistor and a breadboard and everything. And in platforms like, Lego Robotics or the Pico Cricket that I'm showing here, it takes 1 wire and 1 connection. So those things, they look like very mundane things, like, oh, this is stuff for engineers to, the connectors, the language. But those things are absolutely important because they define who participates in the communities. So designs that grow with the child. And then I'll talk about a product that, never came to market, unfortunately, but that I co-designed with Google Creative Labs called Google Blocks. So there is only 1 prototype in the whole world. And I think it's a very cool design. But what I'm going to talk about here is that initially the idea of this product was to create sort of a physical programming kit for kids. And one of the things, I insisted a lot in the process of design is that you don't want to design something that serves a single purpose and that the kid, gets tired of it and puts it in a drawer and forgets about it. So, you can see here the kind of programming blocks. So this is a physical thing, you can go forward, make a square, there are if blocks and repeat blocks, etc. But what I suggested in the end and was implemented is that, the blocks, the electronics was actually just an empty block. And then we created a collection of kits that you could overlay onto that design and make it, a bunch of different things. Because my point was that some kids, they want to program music. Some kids want to program sensors in the home. Some kids want to program, all kinds of other things. It's not that everybody wants to be a computer scientist. So we created a kit that grows with the child. So, you have this blank electronic things with RFID ID, and then you just get this plastic part of the RFID, and the toy reconfigures itself to be something else. So, in the top right, it becomes a programmable music machine that you can program things to make sound. In the other one, it becomes a sort of home automation thing, or it becomes a programming thing. And there were like blank, this kind of whiteboard blocks that you could program yourself. So I'm just showing this as an example of how you can make toolkits and products that grow with the child and that are flexible to different interests and different things that kids care about. So it's not you telling kids what they want to do, but you providing a platform for them to engage in very different ways with it. So let me talk about another example, a tool that to create and test your own theories. So together with some researchers at Berkeley and MIT, Michelle Wilkerson and Aditi Wag at MIT, we're creating a programming environment that we sort of call just to make it easy to understand the Scratch for Science. So this is a system that basically allows you to create computer models of scientific phenomena, just like you do in Scratch, but Scratch is more for like stories and games and things like that. And this is more for scientific stuff. And why we want kids to create their own scientific models? Because it's very different to be told what the model is and to engage in true inquiry and try to find out what the right model is. And so I'll just show you one one example of a recent project that we did where kids came up with 4 different models to explain diffusion that, you can see here. They're investigating diffusion. So they programmed their own models, which embed their own theories about what was going on. And so some kids were thinking that diffusion happens by particles attaching to each other. Some thought it was more like an infect kind of model. So, an ink particle touches a water particle and infects it with color, like a viral spread kind of thing. Another one thought that the ink particles were heavier and it would just kind of go to the bottom. And another one was the kind of bounce off model, which is the correct one. But what this tool allowed was for the classroom to become a scientific community of practice where people were trying out different models, different explanations, instead of being like following a scripted thing where everybody gets to the same place. Additionally, we, as you might see here in the system, there is this part on the right where, through a process that we call bifocal modeling, you can compare your own theory to the actual experiment that you did at the same time. So, for example, this kid thought that the attachment model was the right one, and that particles were like attaching to each other, and then when he ran the model, you can see there, and that his own model and the particles were like attaching, and he looked at the experiment, his own experiment, and it didn't really match. So he said, well, I think my model is not the best because it's not what I'm seeing in the water, in the actual experiment. And then he changed the model, and then over time he got to the bounce off model, which is the more correct one. But this whole process was profoundly empowering for the kids who were used to a science class where they go through the motions of a lab, but they know there's nothing there, it's already decided for them. But to do this, you have to design an environment that has enough degrees of freedom for exploration for kids to really feel that they are exploring, and to really explore and create their own theories and engage in this inquiry process in a true way. So, another example of this kind of design. So in this last minutes, I want to just briefly talk about that teachers should be part of this as well, of this process of design. So I can talk more about this in the questions, but we're working in the city of Sobral in Brazil, a very under-resourced part of the country, where we are, the schools don't have much money, many resources, but they happen to have a makerspace. So what we're doing is work where we are training, doing professional development for teachers, for them to create science kits for the schools instead of having to buy this expensive stuff from. So the teachers are become producers of science kits and science activities that are that is kind of changing radically the way they teach education. So this process of empowering design can also be done with teachers so that they can design interesting things. And I want to finish with this last thing, which is about creating a culture of learning. So part of design is not like designing physical things or curriculum and all of that. It's also about designing a culture. And this is a much longer conversation, but this is a project that has been going on in Thailand for many years. Started by the MIT Media Lab, by the way, but then the lab sort of left the project 20 years ago, and people in Thailand continue to do it. But the whole point that I want to make is that over 20 years, there was a process of creating a culture of learning, and they ran, many workshops in remote rural villages. They used technologies in some cases for farmers to, map their territory. For example, you can see here they started many years ago to do maps of their farms, and then over time, the mapping became a way of solving problems in the community. So for example, the farmers realized that, the water shortage that they had was not because there was no water, but it was because the incline of the mountain was too high. So they started building check dams to slow down the water, and they become incredibly productive because they had tons of water. But this became because there was an effort to show that learning was important and creating a culture of learning. So then they start mapping their territory. They start investigating local problems and trying to come up with solutions. And more recently, we've been there, we're writing about this experience now, and we found amazing things that, for example, this farmer is using her GPS enabled phone to map her own, before the mapping was all manual. Now she's becoming much more empowered to manage her crops and everything, because she has everything on maps, GPS enabled maps that she made herself by walking around and looking at this special mapping software. And other farmers are using different technologies, but also sometimes low tech technologies, for example, a chart to design their kind of crop rotation. And all of that, mapping, creating this kind of crop rotation maps and everything, it looks kind of trivial, if you will, but it took 10 years for this community to realize that, those were interesting cognitive tools. Those were interesting tools to get things done in their lives. And it took 10 years of mentoring, facilitation, discussions, community organizing, community activism. So it's really a long game that creates a culture of learning. But when that happens, people are empowered to use whatever tools they have available to change their lives, to improve their crops if that's what they want to do, to better map their water supply and their water their irrigation issues and systems and everything. And that, I want to finish with that because I was, started talking about emancipatory design. And I think in the end, what we want with all these designs and these environments is that people take charge of their lives. They understand that the limiting situations, as Freire would say, that are imposed on them by oppressive systems of all sorts, that those are things we can overcome, and we can overcome through becoming conscious of those forces of oppression that and those forces want to tell you should stay in your lane, you should not be more of what you are. Life is like that. There's nothing you can do. And I think a big part of design and education is to show people that they can be more. They can be whatever they want to be. And learning and knowledge and education is, I think, the most powerful instrument to show people that they can go from the here and now to the new possibilities of life, to whatever they want to achieve. And with that, I thank you very much, and looking forward to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Paulo, for those incredible words, thinking about design at every step of education. We really appreciate your words and your enthusiasm. I'll hand it over now to Adam Durant, who will introduce an appropriate and sort of next stage conversation around these important topics, inequity, education, learning, teaching, etc. Adam?
Thanks, Justice. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the global community. My name is Adam Durant. I'm the program manager at First Hand. It's a program of the University City Science Center in Philadelphia. First Hand is a free STEM learning program for underserved middle and high school students designed to provide skills-based career exposure and direct connections to the Philadelphia ecosystem. Our work at First Hand seems to be directly connected to the work of our next speaker, who I'm very excited to introduce, Ms. Anja Calabrese Barton. Angela is a professor in the Educational Studies Department at the University of Michigan. Professor Barton's research is grounded in the intersections of teaching and learning science with an emphasis on equity and social justice. At the University of Michigan, Professor Barton was the primary investigator of a National Science Foundation funded project titled Tools for Teaching and Learning Engineering Practices, Pathways Towards Productive Identity Work in Engineering. Later, her paper, Designing for Rightful Presence in STEM, the Role of Making Present Practices, was selected for the best paper published in the Journal of the Learning Sciences Award for 2019. Angela's recent work takes place within 3 interrelated strands. Number 1, working within the intersection of formal and informal education in support of understanding and designing new possibilities for equitably consequential teaching and learning. Number 2, designing teaching, learning tools and experiences that promote more expansive learning outcomes, such as critical agency, identity work, and social transformation. And the 3rd strand, which I'm most excited for her to touch on today, include methodologies for embracing authentic research and practice work that attends to practitioner and youth voice and critically engages the goals of equity and justice. Angela's work exists at the frontiers on thought of all these topics, and it's our hope that her talk will galvanize you to take even more action in all of your respective roles and networks. Today, Angela will share with us a talk titled Community Bio in and at the Edges of Justice. Please join me in welcoming Angela to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I am going to share my screen as soon as I can find it. Yay. All right, you can see it, right? Okay, so thank you, Adam, and good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. Paulo is a really hard act to follow, so I'm going to try my best. I'm an outsider to the community bio, but I'm an insider to making makerspaces. And as a living being and a member of the larger global ecosystem, I'm very much intrigued by the community bio movement, especially from a justice-oriented perspective. And as I've done reading on community bio, I've seen it described as democratizing, as subversive amateurism, as science without scientists, as countercultural, to name a few. And, as I mentioned, I don't come from the world of community bio, but rather the world of STEM-rich making. And my work primarily involves youth of color from low-income communities. And many of the youth I work with make with that same subversive amateurism, the same countercultural ethos of democratic openness that describes community bio. Their work, perhaps very much like your work, however, adds up to more than this collective set of ideals. It's also disruptive, it's speculative, it's transformative, and it seeks for both healing and joy in a world where structures actively work to limit such. So consider the following 3 quotes, which come from my own long-term participatory ethnography work with youth and community-based makerspaces. So in this first quote, Fall, a 15-year-old, says, "Some people make you feel that you can't be accomplished in life. With the little free STEM library, I felt accomplished. The library helps kids practice reading and learn more about science. If kids live in a library desert like us, it really matters more. If we were over in the South Side where I live, people would be like, that's cool. If we go to the East Side and they could learn too and make a difference too, then they would reach out to other communities and it would just keep growing and growing." So this is what Fall said about her work imagining, designing, and building a little free STEM library for her community center in order to push back against the system that surrounded her home and her neighborhood with essentially a library and a transportation desert. And as a struggling reader herself, she felt that access to STEM books would help others learn to read, but also to engage with science, aspects she felt were limiting in her school. She also included mini maker kits in this little free STEM library so that others could make the things that she had a chance to make. And she added eye-catching LED lighting system powered by a hand crank generator, which would be good for the environment and would get kids curious. And she describes the project as one of the hardest things she's ever worked on in her life. Oops. Okay, second quote I want to share with you. Jasmine, 15-year-old, says, "The racist stereotype is that Black people are not listening to science, but that is not true. Maybe it's the other way around. like science is not listening to us. I just wish that people could see what I could do, like what I'm doing at home, making home hand sanitizer, making masks, caring for my elders. I don't want to act white. I don't want people to tell me I'm not white enough. I want you to know how I feel as a young Black girl in America in STEM, and I want to feel like I can be me in STEM and have that celebrated. So Jasmine said this in reference to what and why she made at home during the pandemic and what it meant to her. She also described these actions as necessary because she felt like the multi-pandemic was forcing her to choose between her health rights and her civil rights. Especially when she wanted to attend peaceful racial protests, but didn't have the health safety equipment she needed in a pandemic to attend safely. So just like fall, Jasmine's making efforts push back against the dominant norms and structures that oppress her and her community and that leak the joy and celebration from her efforts. Okay, third quote, last quote. Jennifer, 11-year-old, says, I feel like it will be super cool. People will love it. They'll say, who made this? It was me. And then they'll ask me like, that tiny person always in the background did this? I'll say, yeah, I did that. It'd probably say, this girl knows how to have fun, how to get down and smart when she really needs to. This girl can be fun. She could build things. She could make the world a different place and help everybody else learn how to have the type of fun she has and stuff. Little kids can do ginormous work. And so this last quote references a light up electric scooter that Jennifer made to get places safely in the dark in a city where public transportation and her own familial resources for transportation are sorely limited. And where she worried about, moving around in the dark as a safety issue, especially in our long winters here in Michigan. So just as important though, she viewed the project as one of essentially reclaiming STEM rich making and remaking it in her own image, one of fun, one of joy, and one of and for the public good. So, looking across these comments, youth are reminding us that their making is both embodied and historicized. And what I mean is that their making is deeply grounded in their lived lives and communities, shaped by the everyday present and its location in history, such as being responsive to socio-political processes and their consequences, like the kinds of policy decisions that leave kids living in transportation and library deserts. And the youth's making is oriented towards possible new, just, and sustainable futures. And so here I mean not just the immediate material futures of their individual lives, although that's important, but also the possible futures of families and communities, of STEM, of making, and of the world itself. And so perhaps most salient to all of you in the community bio community is how youth's making contribute to what I call an alternative infrastructuring of sustainability and care. Care for themselves, their families, and their communities' presence and futures. Embodied, historicized, and structural forms of care. This is the kind of political work imbued with political clarity and communal bonds for cultivating critical awareness on racial and social justice, but also oriented towards action and accountability. And it's this kind of justice-oriented praxis of alternative infrastructuring that refuses the separation of the past from the present and possible futures. And it also demands the kind of critically aware action that's linked to accountability in the sense that local actions, things that we might do in the here and now in our community bio lab, whether it be a light up scooter, as the youth made in the Makerspace, or a biohacked EpiPen, these local actions make history, and they have social and political consequence, not just in the short term or in ways we intend. And so it's this kind of alternative infrastructuring of sustainability and care that we don't always talk about when we're talking about equity and justice in making or in education. But I think this notion of alternative infrastructurings of sustainability and care helps to make visible, helps to uncover the strengths and forms of expertise communities of color and low-income communities literally leverage every single day in and day out in their own making to survive and to thrive, despite living within structures that were not designed to serve them or their loved ones. And so when a community collectively engages in both resource reallocation, new resource and knowledge development, as we saw in all the examples I share with you, I mean, especially now in the midst of a global pandemic, for example, or even just trying to get through the harsh, long winter here, new critically informed and healing forms of infrastructure can trace over, can make visible, can actively challenge and publicly challenge the gaps of support left by power holders who do not serve public interests, especially minoritized publics. And so what would it mean then to take this idea of alternative infrastructuring as a starting point for thinking about justice in community bio? Well, first, it's important to know why justice and not equity. First, a focus on justice, and in particular, a critical justice, shapes the questions we ask about whose science and whose bio, whose community, who's making, and whose outcomes. And also because a focus on justice pushes us to beyond thinking just simply about who has access and opportunity. And, you know, so while justice is determined by distribution of resources, opportunities, and social capital, it's also determined by being able to leverage these resources towards doing things that matter in the world in ways that break down unjust relations between people and society. And if we unpack this just a bit more in the context of community bio, we have to consider the intersecting systems of community bio itself and its hope for engagement in the world as it is now and as it could be. So in community biospaces, we must situate and critically interrogate questions around who's making, who's teaching, who's learning, what's being made, what's being taught, and shared to whom and why within sociopolitical context, or else the work of community bio may only serve to reproduce racial, gender, economic, and other inequalities in both access and opportunity and possibilities in community bio. And then when we consider community bio's relation to the world, we're further reminded that the work of community bio is always political. And as I noted earlier, anything and everything that is done in community bio makes history, and that they have social and political consequence, and not just in the short term and not just in intended ways. They contribute to, or they work against, alternative infrastructurings of sustainability and care. So then why the edges of justice, and what do I mean by that? Well, as an emerging movement, the contours of community bio, including the very power relations which frame it, are still rather fluid. They've not yet become settled or disciplined or codified, presenting challenges and possibilities for justice-oriented work. So systems of power shape what community is, including its legitimized discourses, practices, tools, processes, and outcomes. And so what is emerging and what is solidifying in the culture and ecosystem of community bio has to be, up for contestation. What's becoming institutionalized and taken for granted in ways that disrupt or reproduce injustice for people, for organisms, for ecosystems has to be contested. It's imperative that attention be given to how this developing culture is solidifying so that it can be disrupted or amplified in particular ways. So if we take a step back just for a second, it is really interesting. It's such an interesting and challenging question to think about issues of justice in the community bio community, because your field's taken shape in part literally as fundamentally a justice concern, whether it, be the biohacking to make insulin more affordable, COVID testing more accessible, a pushback against big bio and their profit-driven interests, or the desire to share knowledge and practice, or literally just to bring joy back to doing bio, especially in the spirit of doing bio for the public good. But as the field matures, as it's moved from garages to community bio labs, as ethical norms are being established and networks and tools grow for the sharing of information and approaches, then how this work is happening, by whom, and to what ends really matters. And this needs to be made visible and fostered through locally contentious practice. Just for example, despite the goals, these democratizing goals of the movement, who is participating still remains a challenge. Similar to the maker movement, I just read that the average DIY biologist is male, educated, and young, and works 7 hours per week on DIY projects. And so this kind of making visible, that is in this case, who's doing the work, is not enough though. As Melissa Creary, who writes about bounded justice, reminds us, quote, inclusionary practices can be understood as a political performance of the present, meant to remedy a diagnosis that is both historical and embodied and not one of disruption and transformation. And so when I bring that idea forward, I think it tells us that part of this edge work is making hyper visible the structures of the movement seeks to create as well as disrupt. And so the questions that I have for the community bio community are, how have the pathways pioneered, the democratizing pathways pioneered in this movement had important texture and insight on what it actually means to expand access and opportunity. Access and opportunity are not simply about getting people into community labs. Like the youth I work with, quotes I share with you, inclusion has to be about infrastructuring in ways that disrupt and transform. So your community has pioneered ways, but these ways need to be made hyper visible so that their links to accountability can be interrogated, in the sense that, as I have said, local action makes history and has social and political consequence, not just in the short term and not just in intended ways. And so when we think about these democratizing structures coming into focus, like inventing low cost and open source tools, establishing infrastructure for sharing ideas and disseminating knowledge, developing new forms of access beyond physical spaces, we have to ask not only who is inventing low cost and open source tools, for example, but whose interests do these tools serve? Whose histories do they embody and project? What new alternative infrastructures do they produce? And we can also ask, how do these constructions of potentially democratizing structures make possible the kinds of political struggle necessary for social transformation? Community bio makes visible questions about power, about control, about domination in new ways. Here I'm thinking about not only how community bio itself can be used as a tool on others, but also how community bio work itself involves the treatment of the organism itself. So how are organisms treated as machines, by whom, and for what purposes also has to be a part of this discussion. So it's important also to document and challenge how this fastly solidifying community bioculture and ecosystem accounts for how it positions people and organisms as objects of power or oppression. So another way to think about the edges of justice is how the field in part has defined itself, indeed provocatively, with binaries: science without scientists, anti-institutional, anti-corporate, anti-academic. You can probably all name a whole bunch more binaries than me. What borders and edges do these binaries make visible, and which do they render invisible? Borders are entrenched with power structures. They're ideologically and socially constructed spaces that separate through, for example, the use of language and power, often reifying dominant histories and master narratives that oppress. So indeed, as my colleague Camille Wilson writes, quote, throughout history, the most dangerous battles for power, territory, and culture and cultural reign have involved highly contested spaces that are demarcated by human set borders. In military wars, such borders are protected by soldiers and weapons. Some weapons are masked, like landmines, and others are more visible, like the wires lined with explosive links that, if tripped, will detonate and prevent someone from crossing into a forbidden space, end quote. So, what borders and edges of borders do these binaries establish as critical to the community bio movement? How do you fortify your borders in hidden, invisible ways? Who is helped and who is harmed by these fortifications? It might be useful to think beyond binaries towards borderlands. Borderlands shifts the power from those benefiting from borders, even if it's you, to those impacted by borders by prioritizing the experiences of the marginalized. This brings us back to these questions of whose lives, whose past, whose presence, whose futures does community bio embody? Does community bio project? Does community bio ultimately serve? To whom and to what are we accountable, and in what ways? And so here I want to think about what the hope for outcomes of community bio might be at both the individual and collective level in working towards justice. And I ask this in particular with an eye towards K-12 educational spaces. And I want us to consider not only individual outcomes, that move beyond content and practice or even identity and agency, to consider the collective outcomes that orient towards justice, such as how might community bioeducation foster social change at the intersections of social, economic, gender, and racial justice, technologies, and their use and governance in civil society? Or how might community bioeducation address not only biology education learning goals equitably, but also the needs of people in civil society? But underpinning these questions, it is so important to attend to the ethical and political dimensions of learning, which are the roots of this stance on justice. By ethical here, I'm talking about how people engage with community bio towards affecting people's lives, social relations and possibilities. And by political, I'm talking about these contentious, power-mediated tensions between bottom-up and top-down processes of community bio, along with that critical awareness, contestation, and transformation of these processes towards new purposes. And so what community bio means for K-12 education from these ethical and political dimensions is an open and contested question, and one that requires very careful and critical reflection in the community. But I think that these broad questions around culture, ecosystems, and outcomes offer some direction to consider in moving forward with the justice agenda. So my last point relates to how the work of community bio always exists at the edges of the past, present, and future. And so, as I say right here, community bio as very much a vision for and a practice of speculative living and design, sits at the juncture of the world as it is and the worlds that could be. And it's rife with tensions and contradictions of these historicized positionings. So, much attention focuses on the design of processes, tools, and artifacts in the maker world. I'm guessing it's probably true in community bio. And that's really important work in maker ed. But to push on this justice-oriented agenda involves attending to speculative design dimensions, which also involve imagining alternatives in not only process tools and artifacts, but also social futures, particularly in relation to future scenarios enmeshed with new technologies. This would happen using both historicized and future-oriented lenses. The current work on design and speculative futures is really fascinating if you haven't dug into it. Jo Hung writes, speculative design focuses on, quote, fictional scenarios that offer possible futures already embedded and ready to become in our present. She also notes that, quote, sidestepping the development of functional design products, speculative design instead produces alternative imaginings and possible realities in order to question how and why we introduce and modify things in the world and for what kind of users. It's this kind of work that highlights both the dilemmas and trade-offs between imperfect alternatives as we think about how we might move forward. And so this kind of speculative design thinking that may be taking place, and I would say ought to be taking place in community bio, is one way to bridge how the work done now in community bio, in the everyday, in the local context, relates to the broader world that's unfolding. And so the challenge here, though, is noted by DeSalvo, is that design is not only inventive, it can reproduce culture. Through the practices of designing, cultural beliefs are materially reproduced, identities are established, and social relations are codified. But he also notes that speculative design opens possibilities to comment upon and critique the present, while offering new possible visions for the future. And it centers, I would say, these political and ethical dimensions of the doing of community bio in social contexts that I mentioned earlier. It's this kind of justice that charges us to dream the world that we want to live in. So if we return to the edges, you know, we are always at the edge of the world as it is and the world as it could be. And it's in the community bio work at these edges, when combined with speculation, that opens up new possibilities for the very kind of infrastructurings of sustainability and care that may give life to new and just social futures. But I want to end on a note of caution of why edges are important. And that is that the work of justice in community bio has to resist its boundaries. Melissa Curry, who I mentioned before, writes about the problematics of bounded justice in the context of health equity, and says that it's impossible to attend to health equity of any one person or any community when the basic social and physical infrastructures underlying it have been eroded by racism and other historically entrenched isms. So, you know, it's not enough, for example, to offer healthcare to a community when the structures, the very structures of society have produced unhealthy bodies. So it's a limited, she says it's a limited response, sufficient to quiet critics, but inadequate to reckon with historically entrenched realities of injustice. And so, you know, this idea highlights how it's impossible to attend to justice in the community bio movement without disrupting the underlying systems which give rise to it. The work of justice in community bio has to involve recreating systems, interventions, policies, and technologies that remake the system. And we need to keep asking ourselves how efforts to promote justice push beyond inclusionary approaches towards reorganizing the community bioculture and ecosystem in just ways. We also need to ask ourselves about our accountabilities in the world as well. Consider how researchers and designers and makers may work with and in communities to help create space for justice in community bio without bounds. For any action, and indeed all of our actions in community bio, make history with consequence, and in so doing, either contribute to our work against or our work in support of alternative infrastructuring of sustainability and care in our communities and in our world. Thank you.
So our final session for this morning, Eastern Time, is going to be on governance and leadership. And so I am going to turn it over now to organizer extraordinaire, none other than Maria Chavez. Everybody, can we give some huge love, snaps, claps, and emojis to Maria Chavez? Maria, over to you.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for the stretch, Amanda. That felt great. I hope
Yes.
everybody is, whatever time of the day it is for you, is having a good day. I'm having a great time listening to everything. I'm already getting FOMO from all the talks I wish we could attend. But let's talk about governance and the Fellows Program now. The Fellows Program means a lot to me. It's something I've been involved with helping organize for the last 3 years. If you don't know me already, if you're new to Biosummit, my name is Maria, she, her pronouns. I'm in the Bay Area, and I've been involved with community science for 10 years. And having run as president of BioCurious and run almost a dozen different community research projects over the years, the biggest question people ask, you know, whether it's starting a community lab, starting community science projects, or anything else, always seems to come down to leadership skills. So it means a lot to me to figure out how do we grow communities and how do we grow projects. And so having this fellowship program to me means that we're enabling new cohorts of leaders to address all the issues and questions and research you want to do globally in your local area. the fellows have become the backbone of organizing the Biosummit itself. And the work they've done this year is really amazing. And so we're going to hear a little bit more about this work as we hear from Abel Kenow. I think Abel is hopefully logged in now. And Abel is part of Arc of Change. And Abel trained under Marshall, who's going to be here shortly. And I hope for a few words from Abel about the program and what it's meant to you to be a part of training us for the last 3 years.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here with you. Yeah, this has been an incredible experience. You know, I first was introduced to this larger Biosummit community through David, who I met at an open mic actually here in Cambridge years and years ago. And stepping into that space felt like a real privilege because I got to see just the inspiration, the passion, the determination that you all as a community bring from across the globe, right? And to like feel the energy of being together in person in that way was just so powerful. And each year there's been a bit of a different question, which I think, you know, David has probably queued up a little bit. But early on, part of the question was, you know, are we a movement? And the next question was like, well, if we are, then what is our purpose? And the following question was kind of like, well, if we do have a shared purpose, how do we structure ourselves in meaningful ways? And so in collaboration as a group, you know, brought some of what I've learned through Marshall and about 10 years now of teaching community organizing in different parts of the world, and worked with this team to structure the first fellowship program about 3 years ago. I see a lot of alumni of that program here and others who helped design it on this call right now. And a little bit for those who are just learning about it now, one way to think about this is at the core of organizing, we believe that the solutions won't come until people who are most impacted by the problem become authors of their own solutions. We also see people as the ultimate source of power. So then if people are our power, how do we organize ourselves in new ways to actually create the change in the world that we want? See, sometimes we look at organizations that have been around for a long time, who already have the power that we're looking for, and we think that we're up against insurmountable odds, right? We actually don't have what it takes. And maybe even sometimes look at our own community as lacking in resources. But that's never actually entirely the case, right? Our communities always have really rich and diverse resources that we can bring together. And that's what the fellowship is all about. It's about seeing the best in ourselves, seeing the best in each other, and learning a few practices and approaches to really turn the resources that we have into the power we need to achieve the change that we want. And you could think of the structure as you know, covering 3 major pillars: story, strategy, and structure. Those are the main things that we focus on. And we break it down into 6 skills: leadership coaching, you know, public narrative, storytelling as a leadership practice. We talk a lot about relationship building at the level of values, not just the issue, team building, strategizing, and also mobilizing for action. So those are the 6 skills that we teach that fall into those 3 buckets. And it's kind of incredible to have people come together and kind of move through what we use as a 4-step pedagogy, where we explain the content, we practice it, we come back and debrief, and each session we get to actually try on the skills that we're learning and talking about. So that's just a little bit about the structure of the fellowship. And the whole thing is designed just like a campaign would be designed, right? Where we have this interdependent leadership model. We call it a snowflake. And at the core, there's this core team. We have a set of coaches that come together to prepare to support the group. Coaches actually now entirely made up of alumni from the Biosummit. So all the coaches are from your crew, from your squad, and they're actually preparing to hold space for those of you who are now entering the fellowship program. And we've gone through 3 years now, 36 participants each year. And we already know that this community is expanding in really remarkable ways. So that's just a little bit about the fellowship program. And you know, for me personally, it's been a wonder to see the ripple effects of what happens after folks go through it, right? It's really hard to measure the impact in the moment, but over time, we've heard a lot of wonderful stories about the work you've done out in the field and what you are continuing to pass on to other people. So yeah, always forever grateful to be here with you all and part of this community. And I'm looking forward to the fireside chat we're going to have in just a few minutes. But as I understand it, we have some fellows that we're also going to hear from. So I'll toss it back to you, Maria.
Great. Thank you so much, Abel. We couldn't have this program without you, so you are foundational to what we do. But to give everybody a little bit of flavor of what it's been like for the program, we want to hear from the fellows who've actually gone through it, to each give us 90 seconds, and I will interrupt you guys if you go over, to tell us about what it was like being in the fellows program. And we're going to start with Harry Aklago from Kumasi Hive Biolab in Ghana, who was from the 1.0 initial class. So if we could have Harry come up.
All right, thank you very much, Maria, and hi everyone. It's been great to be back here again today to share with those attending Biosummits this year, especially those attending for the very first time, my experiences and how it has transformed me since having participated in the first BioFellows program. I would say for me, it's helped me to identify core values that are driving the kind of initiatives that I participate in now, largely trying as much as possible to extend the bio-revolution that we see elsewhere on the African continent, because for me, that was the drawing factor for me when I started attempting to participate in the Biosummit. The very first time it was started, some 4 or 5 years ago, and then subsequently getting the opportunity to become a fellow. We have since been able, through other people who are other community organizers, through several initiatives like the Africa Open Science Hardware Summit, giving me the opportunity to actualize some of my leadership skills that I actually honed from the BioFellows program. Subsequently, this year, we were also able to organize the SynBio Africa conference, first of its kind, to make known, about biotechnology and the potentials it holds for us as Africans. And I think all of these skills I got from the BioFellows program, and I continue to make use of some of these skills personally. And I think this is something worth mentioning and how it's benefiting me. And I believe that my other colleagues who are doing amazing work in other regards, which we will also hear from. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry. We're going to go super lightning quick. So we got Amanda Obadike. So that was 1.0 Harry, who does amazing work in Ghana. Amanda Obadike from STEMI Makers in Nigeria. You are up.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. And thank you so much for the opportunity to, highlight my experience at the Biosummit. So for one thing, the Biosummit gave me an opportunity to have a family for free. I have collaborated with amazing people like Amanda Strawhacker, Bushra, and the rest. And, also with a fellow who we helped design the African Science Festival. So another second one, which is very important, is it gave me the opportunity to be very confident, because a lot of times in our work is wanting to design STEM education project or encourage government to invest in scientific research, but it made me to go all out there to ensure that the government is involved, because it's one thing to design this project, it's another thing to ensure that the government can take this pilot project and, put it into policies. So I've seen this work, just about pitching whatever we do, and this government, identifying with what we're doing, and, try to see how to refine teachers' education, set up STEM clubs, biolabs, and etc. So I would really encourage people to, key into this family, because it's a very rich network of people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Amanda representing the 2.0 class of BioFellows from Africa. And now we're going to talk to some different representatives from the 3.0 class. And coming up first, we have Jessica McGrath from North America in Oakland, California, and Counterculture Labs.
Hi, yes, thank you. So it's already been mentioned some of the things that we're getting out of the fellowship. And the first one is a great set of tools that lets you sort of organize your framework and gives you a different way of looking at things. The second is, as Amanda mentioned, it's the confidence. Like this fellowship really forced me to look inward and see that a lot of the barriers that I was facing were actually fears that I had created for myself. And so it gives you the tools and the confidence to start to tear those down to make the real changes. But then again, the best thing that you get out of this is exactly that. It's the family. You get to meet these people and work with these people who are really amazing change makers throughout the entire world. And you get them for free. As Amanda said, you get these people who just want to help you, and I've already tapped into that. You know, I staffed a lot of the panel that I'm chairing later in the day from fellows, both my current class and my big siblings in the previous classes. I can't encourage everyone enough to take part in this program because it is truly amazing and life-changing.
And everybody's running on time. I love you all so much. Next up, we have Sofia Tore from Ecological Food Sense in Ecuador, joining us to represent South America.
Hey everyone. So I am Sofia from Ecuador. I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to be a part of this fellow's program. It was an amazing experience. It has been the building block. I needed to have the clear vision of where leadership can take me and how to provide the same opportunity to my community. So one of my biggest dreams is to be able to help my community being a sustainable community builder in LATAM and give the guidance to achieve their goals and of course motivate them. And this training course has led me to being able to speak with the language of the emotion to move people into agency. So thank you so much, Abel, Maria, and all team organizers in general of Biosummit. The Biosummit, the bio community has changed my life, changed my perspectives, and changed my expectation for the biotech future. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're muted, Maria.
This is what happens when I'm trying to work on a spreadsheet while I'm giving a talk. Don't do that. Don't be me. I'm a bad example for everybody. Next up, we have Jan Martin from Nutshell Biohub in the Netherlands.
Thank you. Well, as a now a fellow myself, I would like to thank you all for this opportunity. It's been a great learning experience. I loved the course, loved the way it was set up in like the central sessions, the breakout pods, which give you more of a hands-on opportunity to actually practice. The one-on-one sessions really stood out. To me, that's really where you learn most when you actually learn by doing. One of the things that really stood out for me also is the importance of the story of self. This is something that I had in my earlier experience, also in leading groups, had not stood out to me so much. I always felt like, you know, everybody is a self, everybody has a story. So why would my story be any more important than anyone else's story? But on considering that, I actually was like, for one thing, it establishes trust. You know, people know what you're about and where you're at. And also your own story is very much like other people's stories as well. So your story of self, in a sense, is not really about yourself. It's about all the others as well. And that was really, for me, one of the takeaway messages.
Great, thank you so much. I'm glad to have you here. And I'm excited. Next up, we have Hatem Mohammed Abdelraham from Egypt, who is an iGEM mentor, as well as doing research. If we can highlight Hatem coming up next. Hatem, are you there? I see you online. Is your internet connected?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yes, can you see me? Yes, great.
We can.
So, yes. So I'm excited to be with you right now. Okay. So, excuse me, I'm with this cover just because in a public place. I just want to highlight that this fellowship was so valuable to me. I managed to develop foundational skills like team building, relationship building, and also strategy building. These foundational skills are actually essential to develop my leadership goals in where I aim to develop leadership in synthetic biology, in research and entrepreneurship. This is my actual ambitions. So I think this fellowship is giving me the foundational skills to realize these foundational, these ambitions in the future. And I'm applying for a PhD in synthetic biology this year. So this fellowship is giving me the chance to realize what I aim for in this future.
Great. Thank you for joining us from Egypt. And I hope everybody's getting that real global sense from how amazing we are. And Hatem is one of our first ever attendees at Biosummit from Egypt. So we're excited. Another first is our next up fellow, and our final fellow we're going to hear from today. Malika Vasilova is joining us from Kazakhstan. So she was our first Biosummit attendee from Kazakhstan and our first fellow from Kazakhstan. So tell us about what it was like to join the Fellows program.
Hi everyone, it's really nice to be here. And many of other fellows mentioned that they gained confidence through the fellowship, and I totally agree with that, because many of us come from the place of uncertainty of our leadership practice. Am I not abusing my power? Am I doing some impactful actions that have good social impact on society? And I had to challenge my practice of leadership, and I didn't only have to challenge leadership, but also my own beliefs, my story of self. Why am I doing what I'm doing at the moment? And what are my motives? What are some experiences in my life that made me think this is a problem that I want to devote my attention to, my resources and work around? And it was a good experience for reflection on how to become an active leader, a trustworthy one, how to build your platform. And before doing all that, you have to really think, why are you doing this? Whose problem are you trying to solve? And who is your actions going to benefit by the end? And this is something that was really important. And we all come from different places and backgrounds and experiences, but we notice that all fellows face same problems in their practice of leadership, in their implementation of different projects. And we realize that we can unite effectively to solve a problem when we have a good sense of purpose.
Yeah, thank you so much, Malika. I think that, you were perfect to wrap things up. Before we move on to Marshall, I just want to say that the program is really inspiring. If you're really excited after hearing about it, I have a form in the chat, and we'll put this in Slack. This will let you sign up to give us just your name and info saying you want to apply for the Fellows program next year, and you want me to tell you when the application is open before everybody else. So your opportunity is here to be in the 4.0 Fellows class, and I'm handing it over to you, David.
Actually, Maria, you're going to stay right there because we're about to do a little fun group fireside chat. So I'm just going to spotlight Abel and bring Abel back onto the spotlight. And then I'm going to spotlight Marshall, who is in the building. So let's get Marshall up here. Yes, yes, everybody, can we all give a huge round of applause and some love to Marshall Gans and to Abel Kano and also to Maria Chavez. So great to have everybody here. And actually and one more round of applause for all the fellows, really. That was so amazing to hear all the voices from both this year and past years. Y'all are so incredible and amazing. So Marshall, Abel, Maria, it is great to be back here with you all. This is like family reunion. Marshall, this is our yearly reunion with you. So thank you so much for taking time to be here with us. Marshall, can you believe this is year 5 of Biosummit?
No. But then I've noticed that time seems to pick up pace, it's an odd phenomenon. And it's more a measure of experience than duration. And so I think the depth of experience reflected in the last 5 years is really, really substantial. Yeah.
So everybody, just as a quick background again, Marshall has been a part of all 5 of our Biosummit events. And as Abel was saying earlier, each year we've explored different types of themes, like are we a movement? What's our shared purpose? What are our ethics and norms? How do we structure and govern ourselves? And so Abel and Marshall, for both of you, earlier today, we started this morning with the awarding of the LaDonna Bravebull Science Award. So this is the first time a dear community member of ours. And so I wondered for Abel and Marshall, for both of you, reflections on this idea of science activism. And I know, Marshall, in the past, you sort of have looked at our community and been like, oh my God, we didn't know that you guys had community organizers doing bio. Like, really? That's a thing? Right. So just curious for both of you guys to just reflect on that a little bit.
Abel, go ahead.
Marshall, I'll kick it over to you first, and I'll jump in second.
Go ahead. I'm still trying to deal with Trinity's image here. It's a little scary. Trinity, wherever you are, I hope that's not a proximate image there. I hope people know what I'm referring to. Anyway, no, this has been a real wonderful journey of discovery for me. You know, when you come out of the world of politics and social movements and all of that, you know, the world of science, well, before I was a freshman at Harvard the first time, there was a book that we were all required to read by C.P. Snow called Two Cultures in the Scientific Revolution. And it's about this bifurcating of humanities and science and how problematic that is, because it tends to drift toward questions of how without grappling with the why questions, or grappling with the why questions without the how. And it's like you know, we think of leadership as involving head, hands, and heart. It's like a three-legged stool. And the trouble with the how dominating is that then everything becomes about means and the ends get forgotten. In fact, they get conflated to where the means become the end in itself. The sort of value of, that would be really cool, you know, that's a legitimate value of wonder. But if it's also not coupled with the sense of responsibility, of compassion, then it goes down, it goes the way of that scientist we read about in the early 19th century, Victor Frankenstein, who got so obsessed with the how that the why completely irrelevant, and he denied any responsibility for it. A book authored by Mary Shelley, really, whose mom, Mary Wollstonecraft, was sort of one of the pioneers of feminist awareness and consciousness. So this grappling with those two and bringing them together, wow, what could be more important in this time in which we're living, where our power can so exceed our capacity to manage the power that we create. And that is a core question, not just individual, but communal and institutional. And I think we're at that. And I just think it's so great what y'all are doing by grappling with that, facing it, engaging. It's the only way we learn how to deal with this stuff is by dealing with it. So thanks, David.
Abel, turn it over to you.
Yeah, you know, the one thing I was, as you were mentioning, Marshall, about the particularity of this culture, right? There's a lot of richness here. For us, it provided a rich grounds for experimentation. So in working with this particular community, you know, so when we do trainings, for example, with journalists or doctors or educators or community organizers working in criminal justice, each community in a sense has its own culture, ways of doing work, ways of thinking about their roles in the world. And when we came here, one of the things that really struck me was the proclivity for rapid innovation and sharing really quickly, right? Like it was just incredible to, you know, meet some of the groups and some of the work you were doing and how quickly you were trying to like spread what you were designing and spread the sort of, you know, secret sauce of what you were building. And so when we got into the question of what is our purpose, this became an opportunity to experiment with actually designing a shared purpose with 300 people in a way that we never had before. And, you know, it was kind of like building with the core group and then cascading outward and outward and outward from there. And I felt this receptivity within this community to really dig in and operate in that way. There was just an openness to it, right? To that approach and that way of doing things that already exists within the way that you engage with your own science. So I think there's something here too about, you know, the ways in which the way we're teaching leadership already aligns in a lot of ways with your values and orientation to sharing, connecting, and making solutions for people in a really specific and concrete way, right? To improve daily lives. And that's really at the heart of what we're also trying to teach and do. So Yeah, just one quick reflection, but I'll toss it back to you, David.
Yeah, and just to say too, to build on what both of you are saying, you know, Marshall, for this field in particular, I mean, we're literally engineering new life forms, like literally in labs, synthesizing DNA molecules and putting them into organisms. We're really talking about some pretty serious things when we think about these technologies. And I think the story of Frankenstein, which you shared, is it's so spot on for this group. And, you know, for just to clarify for those of you listening, you know, Frankenstein is not the monster, right? Frankenstein is the doctor. Frankenstein is the scientist who ultimately abdicates their responsibility to that creation. And so for all of us that are in labs doing this work, and in this case, you know, really organizing communities to think about how we engage with these technologies, this training, I feel like, is just so critically important for us as we engage with ethics, as we engage with norms and these questions of why. I think the previous sessions with Angela and Paulo, thinking about justice, how do we ultimately engage and think about participation? Who has agency, who doesn't? And to me, you know, it's so critical, Marshall, the work that you and Abel and Maria, all of you have been doing to really kind of bring all those questions to the forefront and for us to grapple with this. You know, as an academic, you know, I did my PhD, did all these programs. I'm like, I didn't do an ethics, you know, type of framework like we do here. You know, there was no serious discussion the way that we have in this program. So I'm just really grateful to all of you for all the incredible work. Maria, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to before we go to the next question.
No, I was going to say it really ties in together because, you know, when Paulo was especially talking about unteachable skills, we were talking about education and what are the unteachable skills we should be teaching some people. And, you know, each of the 3 years we've gone through the fellows program, the biggest thing I reflect on and some of the biggest feedback we get from fellows is that we're teaching them the things that they were never taught, especially, you know, folks coming in from academia who have done PhDs or are in the midst of their education, that they aren't learning these concepts of how to tie things together because we have bifurcated, as you said, Marshall, science from humanities. We don't put enough emphasis on ethics, on community, on why are we doing, you know, the science we're doing, the idea of intentional communities, because I feel like a lot of what happens in community science has been accidental communities. People accidentally come together, but they are not intentionally creating a community for a purpose. And teaching them to do that is really powerful.
Yes.
So everybody too, I see the chat. By the way, just shout outs to everybody in the chat. This whole morning has been just so incredible. It's like the conference within the conference inside the Zoom chat. But feel free to ask any questions too if you guys want to engage with us as well. We're very happy to do that. The next kind of thing I wanted to just mention for everybody here, you know, Marshall, you know, last year again we ran a whole governance exercise, and we're actually going to do a repeat of that exercise with a few tweaks this year. It turns out you can't figure out governance like overnight. It turns out that takes some time, structure. So I would love, you know, Abel, you and Marshall, and also Maria, just to reflect a little bit about the importance of structure, right? I think, you know, one thing with this movement in particular, right? You know, I had a slide at the very beginning about pirate ships, right? Because truly, it's folks with all around the world with so many different cultural backgrounds, so many different perspectives, and different, you know, all kinds of backgrounds. And so for us, in being able to do a statement of shared purpose, for us to be able to kind of engage in some of these collective design, co-design activities has been really important. But structure is one of the hardest ones, right? Because people don't want to necessarily listen to other people, right? Or feel like we're all subject to the same rules, right?
Yeah.
So Marshall, just curious if you can, you know, kick off with some reflections on that point.
No, it's such an interesting challenge, you know, because we're doing some work with the Sunrise Movement on structure itself. It's weird, that word structure, ooh, you know, there tends to be this like instinctive reaction. I mean, if you think of the word, it's just structure, just from the Latin to build. And creating structure is to build something. It implies a future, not simply the moment and not simply the past. And it's based on the agreements or commitments we can make to one another about how we're going to work together. That's all it is. And you know, it's shared commitments. We are now going to work together in this way, this thing. We're going to share this understanding, and it enables cooperation and collaboration and collective effort. Without it, we're just kind of stuck. Everybody's doing their own thing, which, you know, has its role. But if we're trying to actually engage in deep change that requires collective effort, given especially the institutions that stand in the way of more humane world that we're trying so hard to create and that is being so challenged these days, unless we're able to collaborate, cooperate, and work together, I don't know where we end up in this thing. And I think it's an existential kind of question. So structure is not all about how do I get constrained, it's how can I be enabled with others. And we can think of it as structure as confinement, or we can think of it as creating the space within which we can create, collaborate, work, imagine, and succeed. And so I think the first thing is to try to get the poison out of that word and appreciate the fact that it's something we create so that we can work with one another. Then the question becomes, well, how do we structure things like decision-making? Ooh, that's tough. How do we structure accountability? Oh, I don't know about that. How do we structure ourselves in such a way that conflict can be productive as opposed to destructive? Because conflict's necessary for learning and for growth and for development, but it doesn't have to be destructive. We can structure things in constructive ways. I mean, in addition to sort of being able to define a shared purpose so that we have enough values convergence where we can actually, make something together, it's these very practical questions. And there is no one right way. A right way is a way we agree on and that works for us. One of the interesting things in the research on structure, team structures especially, is that when people are having a hard time getting along with each other, it is rarely a function of the individuals. It is a function of poor structure. Because if you get the structure right, where responsibilities are clear, where it's understood what commitments actually mean, it facilitates people working with each other much more productively. The foundation is respect, not necessarily liking, but respect. And we have to be able to work with others whom we don't like, but for whom we can engage in a respectful relationship, which is what's required of us to do public work. So it really matters a lot. And I appreciate that, David. And the struggle that you're having with how to govern yourselves, I mean, that's a struggle the whole world is involved in right now. It really, literally, quite literally. I mean, in this country, we're running into the profound dysfunction of an archaic system of governance, which is not democratic, it's not representative, it's not working for us. And in other parts of the world, there are other struggles. So this is a big deal. And your commitment to life and to growing life and the future really needs to take us in that kind of a direction. So I look forward to learning more in terms of how you grapple with this yourselves.
So Marshall, go ahead, Abel, sorry.
Yeah, no, just really quickly, I heard you naming respect and I'm seeing it pop up in the chat. And I know you've been doing some real work about, the true meaning of that word in the context of leadership. Yeah. I'm wondering if you could expand on that idea of respect, especially because we have such a global group here, right? Working in their own context across the globe. I think it might be useful to say a little more about that.
No, I'm happy to do that. I mean, word origins are always helpful. I mean, respect in English, it means to look again, to respect, to see once again. I think it's really interesting to look at sort of sources of ideas. We did some work on this with mayors at the time of the George Floyd uprising, who were, in a challenging situation, dealing with all they had to deal with. And particularly race was at the center of so much of that. And so we're trying to figure out how do we create a foundation on which to engage with one another in learning and in dealing with this stuff. So we did a little experiment and we asked everyone to recall a moment, a specific moment in which they felt disrespected. Think of a moment when you felt disrespected. And how did it feel? Put a word in the chat. Just put a word in the chat. How did it feel, those moments? How did they feel for you? Small, unequal, feels bad, man, horrible, disempowering. Yeah, not so great, obviously. Now, what about a moment in which you felt genuinely respected? When you felt genuinely respected? Think about a moment and put those words. Let's see, empowering, grateful, confidence, surprised, warm, hopeful, confident. So we experience, respect is an experience, right? It's not just an idea or something we put on a mission statement. It is an experience. And it's an experience that we either create with one another or we don't. And if you think about it that way, then it becomes, okay, how do I enact respect? And we did this with the mayors, and we did it with some of our students, and it all seems to boil down to just three things. One is being seen, knowing that you're being seen, being heard, knowing that your voice is heard. And third is being valued, not instrumentalized, but being of value. And if you think about, okay, how do we, what sorts of ground rules, norms, practices can we establish that assure not only that we see others, but that others feel they are being seen? Instead of know they're being seen, know they're being heard, know they're being valued. And if you think of that as a foundation for governance or a foundation for a collaborative work, it's not bad. It's not bad. It certainly doesn't preclude empathy, because empathy is important, but it's a foundation that I think we can grapple with and actually practice. And that's what we found with the mayors. We had the most productive discussions about all the challenges involving race and police and all that stuff, having done the work to create some common ground of an experience that in fact we do share, which is that of being respected, being disrespected, and how we can create that for one another. I hope that's helpful. It's been very, very helpful in the work that we've been doing. Yeah, thanks, Abel. Thanks for suggesting that.
Abel, do you have a quick follow-up as well, you were saying?
I do, in the context of structure, right? Coming back to, you know, the idea of structure as it relates to respect. And Marshall spoke a little bit about the noticing that you might do, right? Of being on a team and noticing things might be missing. Do we have a purpose? Do we have norms? Do we have roles? Well, in the context of our fellowship program, I am kind of thinking back to Hillel's three questions. You know, if you really do think about the first two, especially, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And if I'm for myself alone, what am I? It starts to ask the question around, you know, story of self, like Sophia and Malik were talking about. Sometimes we think we should be part of a structure, but try to simultaneously take ourselves out of it, right? To like be part of the team, but also have a foot outside of the team, or we see something going right or wrong, and think somebody else should. You know, somebody else should actually start to implement these things, or who am I to suggest that we create some community agreements, right? Like that tension of wanting things to often flow organically. I just want things to just happen, right, by themselves. That rarely is the case, right? That things just happen. It might be the felt experience that things are flowing well, but that often means that someone is doing the work of kind of stepping up to accept leadership, planning before the meeting, right? There's a meeting before the meeting, actually beginning to offer, you know, through one-on-one conversations to see if what you're noticing is actually resonating with other people. And so I just want to draw the connection between your experience of yourself as an agent of change, as someone who can be self-authoring, as someone who has motivations and inspiration, and maybe even sometimes a unique perspective on what's not quite right. I think sometimes we notice a problem and assume everyone else sees it exactly as we do. But sometimes we see it because it's the lens and the leadership skill that we bring to the work, right? And that is an invitation sometimes to our own call to action. I'm a big superhero nerd. You know, as you know, when we get into story of self, sometimes we reference origin moments. I always love to take a moment to call them into it. But whether it's Marshall describing the refusal of the call to action in the example of Moses and the burning bush, right? Where God calls to him and says, I'm calling on you to lead your people. Or it is, Peter Parker refusing his call to become Spider-Man, right? Or Harry Potter refusing the call to Hogwarts. We all tend to refuse that call to action in the beginning. But the question is, how do we start to really harness or really even see ourselves in new ways in relationship to the people around us, right? Not just, again, to be a diva amidst the rest of the group, but really to see in what ways can we step forward to create the structure that we really need in our own space. So yeah, it's kind of like an invitation that I'm hearing in the air as you look around, what are some opportunities to actually invite people into the work that you think can be done. And all of that is really at the heart of designing and strengthening the structures that we're part of, because they're always evolving.
So you guys are just giving the perfect segues to what is actually about to happen next. Okay, we're not going to do it quite yet. We're still going to have a few more minutes of conversation, but just as a preview, we are all about to do a group activity where collectively we are going to work on governance structures. That was the cutest little celebration, Marshall, I think I've ever seen from you. That was pretty.
David, I just wanted to add one more thing.
Please, yeah, of course.
We've begun work. I don't know if you're all familiar with the Mass Design Group, the architects who do social justice architecture. They design the memorial, the lynching memorial at Montgomery, Alabama, and have done extraordinary work in Rwanda and Latin America and so forth. And their view is that built space tells a story. And so what we've been working with them on is introducing narrative, public narrative, in support of their work. And it's fascinating to see in a whole different medium of not words, but visual built space. And what made me think of it is they create structure, literally. And they are conscious of their building as being a hopeful act, because why would you build for the future if there's no future? And it's just been fascinating working with them. Another venue, very different than the kind of venues that I'd worked in before, but fascinating to learn the different forms through which this kind of self, us, now value work and a kind of leadership can be created and expressed. And we had a wonderful workshop with them on Monday and look forward to doing more work in that medium.
So Marshall, again, I think the density of insights in this session has been really incredible, and we're not done yet. We still have a couple of minutes before we transition into the exercise. I did want to follow up and ask Marshall, again, you've obviously been doing this work for many decades now and in many different contexts. We're in year 5 of the Biosummit, but also this larger movement around open science, DIY bio, community bio. This has been going on for a while. It's been 10 plus years. And again, I think many members of our community fits and starts, right? Some communities, they're working together, they galvanize for a little while, then it kind of falls apart, then kind of there's more energy here. And then, so for a movement like ours that's kind of gone through this a bit of a roller coaster, and even for us, even in community bio in this context with the Biosummit, year 5, do you have some kind of, advice or reflections in terms of other movements that you've seen that are kind of in this, kind of the past the hype phase and now in like the hard work phase of just trying to sustaining and keeping things going? Do you have any kind of advice or words of wisdom for us in this phase where we are?
Yeah, no. Movements are called movements because they're movements. In other words, the balance between change and continuity is one of the real challenges we face, because movements are about change, but without also creating continuity, the capacity for sustained change goes away. And without change, continuity becomes suffocating and it dies. And so they're rhythms that need each other. They need each other. And so movements go through phases, it's not like 1, 2, 3, but there are times that the continuity is really important to focus on. Other times that the change is really important to focus on. People struggle with coming up with different ways, different times, different contexts. The important thing is to sustain the life of the movement. And from my perspective, that requires regular refreshment in terms of what this is all about. Why are we doing this? Why does this matter? Sometimes we think we do action and we do meeting. That's what we do as organizations, but we also need to celebrate. And by celebration, I don't mean going out to the bars. That's fine too, but I'm not against that. But by celebration, I mean honoring the values that bring us together, finding ways to do that with one another. When I first got involved in the civil rights movement with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, I went to my first staff meeting of those organizers in Georgia in 1964. And I thought, I'm going to go to this staff meeting. They're going to have maps on the walls and strategy. It was in a sanctuary of a seminary, Gamma Theological Seminary. And I went in, and instead of the signs, they were having a preach-off. Now, I don't know if folks know what a preach-off is, but a preach-off was who could imitate Dr. King better. the humor, the celebration, the joy was so much a part of what was so attractive about, here were folks who were courageously struggling with changing an awful system, and they found joy in it. And I think we have to keep ourselves fed that way and feed each other that way, so we don't lose the movement and don't confuse ups and downs with ends. You know, it can all be renewal. And I just think that's what we buy into when we're talking about movement.
Marshall, that is so awesome. And I think that's a really great, what's the word? A connector to the open mic tonight. So again, hopefully you guys all please sign up. This is your chance to share, and we're going to celebrate again and dance together tomorrow evening as well. As we wrap up the session, I just want to remind you guys, you know, on the Slack, we've got a channel for every single one of these tracks. So the governance and leadership track, there is a track just for this discussion. So please do continue that conversation there. I also do want to mention that we do have a whole track later this afternoon. So actually, Tim Dobbs, if you're there, do you want to hop on really quickly and just give a little preview of what's going to happen a little later? And Tim, if we can keep this really tight, like 30 seconds would be great. Very quick.
All right, 30 seconds. Let's do it.
45 seconds.
So
go for it.
If you were really excited about the governance discussion, and one thing I wrote down is there is no one right way. If you believe that, then we can all get together and work on it and find the right way for us in our community and do that work. Here's a great panel that we're going to see. Here's another great panel, and we'll just kind of look at a few of these just because we only have a few seconds, but these are all going to be really exciting. And then final little wrap up, David's going to introduce a little more about the workshop, but of course, the governance workshop stars all of us. So that's really exciting. All right, how was that?
That was very fast. That was incredibly good. Good, Tim. Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen, and Marshall, if you can guys still hang here for a second, because again, we'll just to clue you in on what we're going to do with the whole group. So if you guys are seeing my screen right now, we have had in year 2 of Biosummit, as I mentioned earlier, we all went ahead and created a statement of shared purpose together, which we've read a couple times already today, so I'm not going to reread that. But what we're going to do in this this exercise coming up is, if you guys all can open up a web browser and go to the biosummit.live web page and go /governance. I'm going to put this into the chat so everybody can click over into this really quickly. You will see that we've taken our statement of shared purpose and broken it into 4 clauses, right? There are 4 key aspects to our statement of shared purpose. One is about building an inclusive global network. One is about cultivating an accessible commons of knowledge and resources. One is about launching community labs and projects. And another is about enabling local educators. Okay, so we've these 4 different clauses that are part of our statement of shared purpose. Now, as Marshall and Abel have now so beautifully said, structure is not something for us to be scared of. Structure is something that we can really embrace and can be something that enables us to do the great work that we want to continue doing. And so part of what we can do now is, shout outs to Clayton and the MIT MVP team. We've set up breakout rooms for all of us so that you guys can pick one of these 4 prompts. Prompt 1, global network. Prompt 2, accessible commons of knowledge. Prompt 3, community labs and projects. Prompt 4, enable local educators. Oh, and if you guys need the password for the website, it is microbes rule. I'll put it in, Sarah's already got it, yes. So what you're gonna do is, Clayton in a second is gonna open up a whole bunch of Zoom rooms. Pick one of the prompts that you would like. So you can pick a Zoom room that or breakout room that corresponds to one of these prompts. And when you pick the breakout room, we'll have about 5 people per room. So try not to, if you see a room that's got 5 people in it, try not to do more than that, because that's, you know, otherwise the discussion might get a little too unwieldy. So try to keep it around 5. If you want to do, for example, global network, and there's a room that's already got 5 people, just start a new room and somebody will join you there, okay? And we'll basically get into groups of about 5 and pick your prompt, get in there and start talking about each one. So if you click that link, so you notice we've got 4 of these prompts. If I click prompt 1, that'll bring me into a Google document where we've got all of these interesting questions that are related to this one. So this first prompt is building an inclusive network. And again, to some of Marshall's points, right? How do you become a member of this network? What are the rights and responsibilities of the members? What are the norms of the network? What are the activities of the network, right? What's the mission of the network, et cetera? These are all like really interesting and important questions that we need to answer. And so when you're in there with your group, you guys can start basically filling out this sheet together. You can start picking questions that you want to answer collectively as a group, and you can start writing down the contribution and what you think the answer might be. Now, if you don't like any of those questions, you can create your own prompt as well, okay, that's related to that topic. And so again, we've got a sheet like this set up for every single one of these areas. If you're interested in education, pop into Enable Local Educators. You can see all the different questions there, and again, a table and a worksheet corresponding to each one of those questions, okay? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Does anybody have any quick questions before we get ready to launch into the Zoom rooms? I think Abel, did you want to say something quickly before we launched?
Just to thank you, and maybe even just a reminder that when we talk about keeping movements alive, the ability to bring in new people to the work is a core part of that. And I think the Biosummit is an essential piece of that. But when new people come in, sometimes in organizing, we call it absorption, right? Like not just treating it like a flash mob where people come and go and never feel connected again, but how do you have the capacity at the center of your snowflake to actually build real relationships with the people who get connected? Well, the fellowship program is really like, a space to build out the center of that snowflake, to experiment with some of the shared purpose work, and to absorb and invite new people into the work. So I want you to do consider, next year, if it's something that is of interest to you. We're constantly expanding in that way, and hope that you can also be part of that growing network. So yeah, I'll say that and toss it back to you, David.
Marshall, any final words before we break?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. We think of agency, the exercise of my agency, as getting constrained by, oh, I've got these obligations. I think a way to think about structure is that it's a way to invest elements of individual agency in creating collective agency. In other words, the capacity to act together. And so it's not a how can I put it? It's not a giving up of agency. It's actually the acquisition of agency at a collective level that's not available to us as individuals. Just to think of it in a much more positive way, because that's what we need. And I just want to thank David, of course, Abel, Maria, everyone, for this opportunity to keep learning with you, because it is a new world into which we're living. And it's your generation that's, got that world. And so the opportunity to learn with you is really exciting. It's terrific. And yeah, I look forward to more. Thanks so very much.
Everybody.
Thank you all.
Yeah, huge round of applause to Marshall and to Abel and to Maria and all of our fellows coaches and all of our fellows. Really, it's a very, very special program. Please sign up if you would like to. And Clayton, should we get ready to launch the Zoom rooms?
David, workshops.
I know, we're going to do that at the very end. We're going to do that at the very end, if that's okay. Oh.
They have to go to launch the rooms because it starts at 1, so we can't do it.
Okay,
we have
okay.
to introduce it.
All right, Salim, let's do a really quick workshop introduction, really, really quick, and then we'll launch into our exercise. Go for it, Salim.
All right, I will be just 30 seconds, okay? So we have 2 rooms today, both chloroplasts and mitochondria. Will start sharp at 1 o'clock. We have some really cool workshops, bioarts, the yeast program, the ecolinguistics, intro into how nature builds from 1 dimension to 3 dimension, clean Sanger sequencing with pre-software, pre-go, and GAP, an open source bioreactor and chromatography by Adrian Flips from Ottawa, and we're gonna sign up with design your own community biolabs. Do not forget to hop over to the chloroplast or mitochondria right in 30 minutes or 20 minutes.
Perfect. So chloroplast and mitochondria, everybody, right at 1 p.m. And all of the other sessions, governance, diversity and leadership, the other 3 main sessions will kick off at 2 p.m. Okay, but workshops start at 1 p.m.